Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It is February 1st, 2024, and today we are super excited to have in studio the Mormon bishop who resigned his position as Mormon bishop from the pulpit. This is a story that we began covering a few weeks back when Mormon Bishop Nick Jones, a video recording of him resigning as bishop from the pulpit was shared, I believe, on TikTok, and it started sweeping around the Mormon and ex-Mormon internet, and then we, of course, reshared that video here on the Mormon Stories channel, and reached out to Nick, or he reached out to us. I forget how that happened, and we decided to have him here in studio to tell his story along with his wonderful spouse, Amanda. And so here in studio, we have, and I'll say bishop because in Mormonism, once a bishop, always a bishop, right? Hey, Bishop Nick Jones.
Hi, John.
How you doing?
Doing okay. Thanks for having us on.
And we also have in studio Amanda Jones. Hey, Amanda.
Hey.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. All the way from Mississippi. And
Yes,
we're also, as always, grateful to have my partner in life, Margie DeLynn. Hey, Margie.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
We are live streaming this one because we thought it would be useful to have people in studio, to have people sharing their questions or comments, and we'll do our best to integrate them throughout today's episode. But welcome to everyone who's joining us on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else. Please do us a favor and subscribe to our channels, hit the like button, comment, etc. And we're always grateful to our donors that make all this possible. So huge thanks to them. So let's go ahead and dive in. Nick and Amanda, y'all aren't necessarily public people. So let's begin. Before we jump into your individual stories that leads to this momentous event a few weeks back, let's begin with intentions, because different people tend to make different assumptions as to why someone would come on Mormon Stories podcast, and they're almost always wrong, especially if those people are kind of Orthodox believers. So Nick and Amanda, do you each want to start by just sharing why you wanted to come on Mormon Stories and tell your story? Nick, you go first.
Okay. This was never meant to be a public thing. We've shared this with a few friends who would actually take the time to listen to us, who are still in the church. I had actually wanted so badly to do it the week prior, but it was Christmas Eve. And I didn't want to ruin the spirit of it all. But it was giving me terrible anxiety to come to the church building and to serve as the bishop for several months, because of some truth claims that I've come to understand were just not accurate. And so we waited for the following week, it was New Year's Eve, to just let the ward know. And that was my full intent, was to let the Ward family know that I loved them and that I just couldn't do it anymore. Little did I know that my younger sister, she actually came just to visit. She didn't even know I was planning to step down until that morning. Mm-hmm. But she recorded it. Now, I had asked my wife to do an audio recording just in case I said something that would get me in trouble. I could always refer back to it and share with, whoever may complain. But she made a video of it and sent it to my family, my brothers and my other sister. And my older brother, who I love, posted it on Reddit. And he sent me a screenshot of it saying, "This thing's blowing up." And I instantly panicked and I asked him to take it down. And he did. He was totally respectful. He said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't think about that." And we went to bed that night thinking this thing would just disappear. And we woke up the next morning to find that there were about 500 million views, or not 500,000 views and it was growing. And we noticed that some people had edited the video and posted it, and it was a little disheartening and somewhat of a shock. And so we thought, well, why don't we do the right thing and post the real one so people can know the true story, or how I really stepped down. And that's how we're sitting here in the studio.
And Amanda, I'll ask you this question too, but what is your intent of wanting to tell your story aside from, why you chose to resign from the pulpit that day? What is it you hope viewers and listeners to take away from today's episode?
People say that people can leave Mormonism, but they can't leave Mormonism alone. I don't agree with that. I can't leave it alone now because I recognize that it's doing harm to people. And so I'm taking a stand with my wife to have a voice for people who haven't had a voice. And John, if I could just tell you this, it wasn't just thousands of messages have come through within days. And it wasn't just hey, we love you, we support you. It was, hey, I'm where you are, and I'm really having the hardest time working through this thing. And it was like being a bishop all over again, times 1,000, because you're reading confession after confession after confession, abuse case after abuse case after abuse case. And it put me in quite a frenzy. I would curl up in a ball and just cry for days on end. And the worst part is I ruptured my bicep and had to have surgery just before Thanksgiving. So I'm normally a very physical, hands-on, labor-intensive kind of person. And all of this came crashing down where I had to sit and not move. So it was just magnified in multiples of, in its weight on both of us. This isn't just me. My wife and I have been doing this together. We share everything with each other. We hide nothing. And we share it with our kids. We've been completely open with them as well. So that's really how we are here, John.
And we'll be getting into both their Mormon stories, but also what caused them to start questioning and doubting, and then what events caused Nick to feel like he needed to resign as bishop. Amanda, is there anything you want to add?
I guess I'm mainly here because, of course, I'm going to support Nick, but I feel like a lot of people also look to me as I'm kind of following along on his coattails. Like, when I have my own story as well, it's not because of the things I'm told by my husband. That's how I feel personally. And then other than that, like Nick said, just the people who have reached out to us has been so comforting. And I just hope to be that to somebody else. Inspiration or comfort through maybe something that they're going through that we're going through as well.
Beautiful.
Yeah. If I could say, it seems that, and I don't want to just say the ex-Mormon community, but the ex-Mormon community is like mastered home teaching and ministering in a way that we're still trying to figure it out inside the church. But we've had some members also who have reached out and have been so kind. Yeah. And that's one thing I want to be clear. I'm not trying to divide. I don't want to divide. In fact, I know members are hurt. Members of a ward that I loved with my soul are hurting right now because I'm sitting in front of this camera. And I want you to know that I'm sorry that you're hurting, but know that pain we feel. And we're always open. Our home is always open. You're always welcome to come sit down and talk with us about anything.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful.
A couple just quick business notes. The first is that we are going to be holding a little meet and greet for those who live in the Salt Lake area and who want to attend. Who want to show up and meet Nick and Amanda, and maybe show them a little bit of love. tonight at 7 p.m. Utah time at Bewilder Brewing in downtown Salt Lake City. There'll be a meet and greet from 7 to 9. So pull out your pens if you want to meet Nick and Amanda, thank them for what they've done for you. Come to Bewilder Brewing at 7 p.m.
You can buy me a beer. I'm not sure I'll drink it, but I've always wanted to buy someone a beer, have someone buy me a beer. So
I'm not sure if I'll be there. I may be there, but Rebecca Biblioteca will definitely be there. She's the
we
one
love her.
organizing that. So a shout out to Rebecca. Also, we plan on tomorrow having a panel of bishops, ex-bishops, to kind of discuss the complexities of being bishops in the modern age. That's going to be tomorrow morning. My friend Bo came up with that idea, and he'll be leading it. But I think, Nick, you might be coming back. So tune in
back tomorrow
for that as well. We've got four ex-Mormon bishops that want to just have a little discussion. So, all right. So that's all the business, and let's just jump in to your Mormon stories. One really cool thing about your stories is that you're not typical Utah Mormons, right? You guys are, at least right now, living in Mississippi, in the South. And so let's just hear a little bit about your Mormon stories. Nick, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, I'd love to. We're from Mississippi. I served my mission in 2001 to 2003 in Mississippi. I met a girl, and that's kind of a fun story that we can maybe tell some other time, or maybe today, I'm not sure. But the funny thing...
You were raised where?
I was raised all over. I was born in Idaho, moved to California at 5, moved to Korea when I was 6, lived there till 1988 to 91, and then from there moved back to Idaho, lived there till 97, then moved to Houston, Texas from 97 to 2000.
Were you born in the covenant? Born as a Mormon?
Sure.
Okay, so your parents were temple married and all that?
My parents, my dad served a mission. My mom is strong in the faith. She's got a wonderful family that's very faithful in the church.
Okay, so your grandparents on both sides, where do they live? Where do they live?
One of my grandfathers, how many generations back, baptized Wilford Woodruff, so we are dyed in the wool on both fronts. And on the other side of the family, Hans Mill members, so we're dyed in the wool members.
Okay. So you went to middle school and high school where?
Houston. I went to Cy Creek High School.
Cy Creek?
Yeah.
They were in my district.
Seriously?
So
Did you
I
live
went
in
to Katy
Houston?
High School.
Say it again. Where'd you go?
I went to Katy High School.
Okay, I know Katy. Yeah,
And
we played ball against them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like Cy Fair,
Small world.
Cy Creek,
Having a moment.
Klein Forest,
Yeah.
Klein Oak,
Yeah.
A-Leaf
Cy Falls,
Elsick,
all of that.
A-Leaf Hastings. They were all in my district. So we grew up.
Did we beat you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Which high school again?
that.
Cy Creek.
Cy Creek was
Creek High
great.
School.
They
Yeah.
were great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we weren't the best basketball team or football team. We did okay. We were 500. Anyway, so you grew up mostly in Houston then
No,
for those years?
I lived in Houston 3 years.
Okay.
Maybe it was 4 years. And then halfway through my junior year, we moved to Salt Lake City, Sandy, Draper area, and I went to Alta High School.
oh wow.
Oh, okay.
And I was a troubled kid.
Yeah.
Not troubled in the sense that I wanted to go party, but I just had no identity, and I was reaching to be friends with anyone and everyone I could, you know.
It's kind of a tough time to move.
It's a
honestly.
very hard time to move.
Yeah.
Halfway through the year, you had really good friends where you were, and having to reset again was very difficult. But some of my greatest friends, one of them ended up marrying my sister. We had dinner with them last night. So good people here. Yeah.
So how many siblings real quick?
I have 5, an older brother, Tyler, myself, then Samantha, who I ate dinner with last night, Forrest, and Hannah,
Okay.
whom I love dearly. And none of them are active in the church. I was the only one other than my parents.
Out of the 5, you're
sir.
the only one who
Yeah, I
has
had
been
this
active.
thing where I was like, I'm a bishop, and I have all these apostate members in my family, and I'm standing for them.
But your parents are still in.
My parents
Okay,
are still in, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
very much so.
Okay, so growing up, typical Mormon family meeting, scripture study,
Yes, sir.
weekly church attendance.
Mom was always pushing scripture study. Dad was always doing dad stuff, worrying about how to pay the bills. And so, yeah, very Orthodox Mormon upbringing.
Okay. And any other thing you want to say about, let's just say up until before your high school years, that's important about your story or your family's story?
Well, if we want to talk about abuse and things like that, we can, if you want to get right into that.
Does abuse related to the church play
Yes.
into your Mormon story?
Yes.
Well, that's a sensitive subject, but if that's an important part of your story, we want to hear about
Okay.
it.
Can I give a shout out to my kiddos before I
Yeah,
get into
yeah,
the emotional
yeah.
side of things?
Yeah.
My son, Luke, he's 17 years old. He's worked for me for 2 years. I own a hardwood flooring business and another mill that manufactures the floor that we make, that we install. But since November, my son has gotten up every morning at 4:30. He gets in the work van, and he's been running my business. And right now, he's putting down 3,000 feet of wood floor.
Aww.
Well, his dad's here on Mormon Stories.
Aww.
This is the young man that I'm teaching to be a good man. And then my daughter, Charlie. I know they're watching right now. Charlie, Daddy's going to say some things that are going to be hard for her to hear. Things that happened to me. Opie, Alice, Sydney, same. So, just know we can talk about it more when I come home. I've got some buddies in Texas, in Mississippi, not Texas. Jason, Wes, Eric. There's a few others I can't name names because they're struggling right now. But I want you to know we see you. We love you. There's someone else, Uncle Carlos. Look forward to catching up with you sometime, buddy. John, I'm just doing what Mormonism taught me to do. To be honest, to be true, to be chaste, to do the right thing. When we lived in Korea, this is 1990. Sorry about all the tissue, but I'm a little bit of an emotional wreck today. A man named David Bennett, I hate to say his name, but I will, served prison time for pedophilia. He was let out of his cage, joined the church, and was called to be the young men's president. To be the scoutmaster. My older brother, I'm going to speak for him, and maybe he should tell his story on your show, John. But there was about 6 or 7 of us boys. And he would have us over to his house on the weekends. And I need to preface something. Sometimes people will say, well, where were the parents? What were they doing? Were they blind? Were they ignorant? Yes. They were blind. They were ignorant. Sometimes when you're a parent, you don't know. You just don't know. You're trying to figure out how to be a parent. So I don't blame them. I need to clarify that because I'm not here to do harm to my mom and dad. I love them. But this man would have us over to his place. Sleepovers, slumber parties. One of the nights I stayed, I don't even know that anything happened except I woke up with no clothes on. He had gotten mad at me the next morning, and he spanked me. He had a temper. He was just a dark individual. And I went straight to my dad when I got home. I said, Dave spanked me, Dad. And I'm sure my dad doesn't even remember it, you know. But I think about my kids. If I found out someone touched them, looked at them, what I would do. But the abuse continued. We'd continue to go to his house. We'd continue to go on church campouts. My particular instance was buried so deep I didn't even know it happened to me, guys, till I was in my 20s. I had just put it away. My brother received therapy, tons of help. I always thought that I was stronger than him, and I didn't need it. So I just dealt with it. But one particular night, I couldn't move. I was drugged. I could speak. I just kept saying, stop, stop. Please stop. You can't speak to animals like this. They belong in cages. And it wasn't what he did to me that was painful. Pain is a familiar thing for me. It was that he made the other boys that I was with watch as he did it to me. This man was arrested, spent like a week in jail, and disappeared. We have no idea where he went. We spent our childhood fearing that he was going to pop out of the bushes and take us. We get phone calls where someone would just stay silent on the other end. We always feared it was him and he knew where we were. There's no way for a kid to grow up. Mm-hmm. So that's the beginning of my Mormon story.
Mm.
Wow.
I'm so sorry.
Really?
Yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what, John? I've been able to forgive him. It's taken a lot of time. I've been able to free him of the weight that he was carrying for what he did to me. And it was healing for me to be able to experience that. And that was actually recent. It's been in recent months, which has been part of my deconstruction.
Well, thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say going to your high school years. Well, do you want to talk about the impact that had or on?
John, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know. That's the thing. It was so, I knew it had happened, but I kept imagining that it happened to someone other than me. I just kept pretending, no, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't understand defense mechanisms, but I'm sure you could probably, lay that out for me. But I just kept thinking, no, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. And what was so odd was I was on my mission when I recognized that was you. I spent many days in my childhood wanting to kill myself because of it, as I've reflected back. We used to have this home in Korea that was built up about 2 stories. And we had a trash chute that we'd put the trash bags down and the trash would come and pick it up. I used to always sit on the edge of that little edge and think if I could just land on my head just right, maybe all the pain would go away. But guess what? I have 5 kids, just like my mom and dad have 5 kids. They have beautiful lives because they're safe. They're safe kids. And they're even more now. They're even more safe now than they've ever been because they don't have to hide a thing from us as we've stepped away from Mormonism.
Amanda, did you want to add anything to up to this point in the interview?
That's up to you. Do you want me to?
Maybe just any remarks or comments. We'll jump to your story.
Okay.
Maybe when we get to his mission, but just
Yeah.
in reaction to what he's shared so far.
I don't think I have anything to add to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a kind of a question. Do you feel like, first of all, just to clarify in my mind, how old, like what years are we thinking of, like that this was happening first
That was 9
time
years
to-
old, for
so
sure.
9 years was when it started, and how long did it go on?
For my brother, it was about a year. His was a terrible case, and I'll tell you, the mission president in Korea, his son was one of the victims, and he ended up killing himself later on in life because of it.
So
This has got some
devastating.
deep roots, but for me, it was really just a few instances I was young. I wasn't necessarily, I was probably someone he was starting to groom in
Yeah.
thinking, you know, in a year or two or in a month or two, this kid's going to start going through puberty or entering into certain phases of what he liked.
I see.
But I'll tell you, he wasn't gentle,
Yeah.
if that says anything. Everything I am, like I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I'm skilled in the art of defending myself quite well.
Yeah.
Everything I am is because of certain things like this.
So makes sense.
Yeah,
Where you can, protection and safety being,
you got it.
yeah, that makes sense to me. So do you feel like when, in looking back, do you have like a pre-self to when this happened? And then
Yeah.
for you, is there like a dramatic difference where like, or did you kind of compartmentalize it and you kind of see?
Yeah, I compartmentalized a lot of it. I think parts of it came out unbeknownst to me. Just for instance, me wanting to just end my life as a kid.
Yeah.
You know, who wants to do that as a kid, right? And as I look back, I was like, you know, there weren't terrible things going on, except that thing. So why was life so bad? And now that I've looked back, I've realized, well, that's why. It was
Yeah.
that thing that was causing all of
That's
that
right.
pain. All of those insecurities of feeling like I had to boost myself up to be more than the way I would have appeared in the eyes of my peers, stems back to that abuse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine.
So maybe shifting to your high school years, you moved around a lot.
Well, twice in high school.
Yeah.
That's it. Had great friends. Was happy. You know?
Twice in high school, though, it's 4 years. That's quite a bit. Yeah.
That's quite a bit, I suppose so. Yeah, we moved junior high. We had just, I guess, finished the school year, junior high, and we moved the very next day, I want to say, from Idaho to Texas. It was very difficult. But you're young, you make friends, and it's amazing how you just naturally do those kinds of things. So it wasn't terrible, guys. I mean, upbringing was okay. Didn't necessarily feel like I was lost in my teenage years. I would say as a kid, like as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, I was lost. I was miserable.
In terms of your church participation, do you want to talk about
Be glad
your
to.
youth experiences and seminary? Just
Yeah.
whatever you think is
So
relevant.
in Houston, went to early morning seminary. I never graduated seminary. I made it 3 years, and when we moved to Utah, seminary was part of the school block schedule,
Right.
which was quite a change. We were used to getting up really early and going. And I was just seeking attention in ways I probably didn't need to, and I ended up kind of being asked to step down from seminary because I was getting a little loud in class. And so I never graduated. I stopped going my senior year, and just was seeking some form of self, trying to find out who I was, and couldn't figure it out. So I left on a mission because I didn't know what I was going to do. And honestly, did I want to go on a mission? No. Did I not want to go? No. I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And when you have a bishop who's, you know, somebody you've shared some confidences with, and you feel like you can trust them, and they slide this paper across their table to you, you take it home. You don't think much of it. So I went. I don't regret going. I had a blast. I met my wife.
Tell us again where you served.
Mississippi, the Mississippi Jackson Mission.
Okay.
It's a great mission. James E. Sheffield was my mission president. Love him. Love everything about the mission. And live there. I live there now. It's no longer a mission, though. It's been closed down. It's now the Baton Rouge, Louisiana mission. And the work is slow in the South. Very, very slow. It might be going the opposite way.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you gained a testimony on your mission? And if so, do you want to talk about that at all?
I feel like I've always had a testimony, John. I'll tell you what I've had a testimony of more than anything. I had a testimony that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God before I even knew Jesus Christ was the Son of God.
Wow.
I knew it. Like, I knew it. Till recently. I've had some serious battles of deconstruction, and I'll tell you, John, your videos with Mike, and I don't know Mike's last name, but LDS discussions. You want to know the one that set it off for me?
Sure.
First Vision, hands down. I know that the anachronisms, the DNA in the Book of Mormon, I'm familiar with all these, and I've known about all this for a decade, but I read all the apologetics and believed them instead of listening to logic. And Mike, how he's drawn this out in LDS discussions is incredible. It's so well done. His website is so well done. So if I could recommend anybody who is on the outs or in who just wants to know, I would look up Mormon Stories, LDS discussions, and I'm not trying to rep you, but I am. Or just go to Mike's website, LDS discussions, I think .com or .org.
Yeah.
The information needs to be out there. People just need to tell the truth.
And we'll definitely, when we get to the part of your story of your faith, we'll cover that stuff in depth.
Great.
So on your mission, are you saying it did strengthen your testimony to the church?
Oh, gosh, yes.
And
Heck
if so, do you want to talk about how that?
Yeah, you're surrounded. You're studying 3 hours every morning, right? 3 hours with your companion on your own. Of course, you're going to get more converted. Absolutely. I would say that that's part of the plan, isn't it? Get these young men on missions so they don't waver ever because of what the mission does for them. And that's really what I was clinging to for 22 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, do you want to talk about meeting Amanda and how that happened? And Amanda, do you want to?
Yeah. I want her to tell it.
Okay. So Amanda, do you
That'll
want
be
to
fun.
maybe talk about your background before meeting
getting
Nick
there?
and converting?
Okay.
Just, whatever you think is
Yeah,
relevant.
that's fine. I am an only child. I was born in Natchez,
You look really
Mississippi.
hot on camera, by the way. Can I say that on here, John?
Yeah, you can.
You just did.
I just did.
I was born in Natchez, so I've lived in Mississippi most of my life. We lived in Tennessee for a couple of years. Ended moving back when my grandpa got really sick. We decided to move back here. My dad was actually talking to me about that just the other day because he was like, if I wouldn't have made that life choice there, you and Nick wouldn't have even ever met. So my childhood, my parents are great. Always had loving parents. I love them so much. But my childhood also had just some pretty bad trauma. I suffered abuse from an uncle from probably age 6, 7 to 14, 15. So for me, kind of like what Nick said, which I'm 100 times worse at it, I buried like everything
Yeah.
in my mind. So I feel like my childhood is a blur, and I've been kind of working through that trauma over the past, well, actually since I met Nick, because he's the one I finally felt safe enough to tell, and it started coming out. But just working through that on the daily, so it seems like, new memories will resurface with time. We, church-wise, I was born, I guess, in the church because my parents were both members, but we were less active for majority of my life. We would go here and there. It would always be like random days where it would be like the primary program, and my mom would be like, get up there and sing. And I'm like, I'm not going to get up in front of these people. Or like we would show up at church and the parking lot would be empty because it was actually stake conference and they weren't even meeting. It was like all those little scenarios. But when we moved back to Jackson, we started becoming more active. And by my high school years, we were going a lot more. Ended up being sealed to my parents my 10th grade year of high school. My teen years, I was more of a troubled child in my teens. Now, like, understanding the abuse that I faced, I can see how I was kind of like numbing myself and my insides because in Mississippi, being a Mormon, I think there was like one other Mormon in my whole school. So it wasn't like I had a group of Mormon friends to get together with. All my friends were not members of the church. So of course, I was doing things I shouldn't have, partying and drinking, having fun with them.
Being developmentally
Yeah.
actually quite in sync.
Yeah, with majority of the world,
Yeah.
right?
Hey, can I say one thing real quick?
Yeah.
That one friend who's a member of the church has continued to be her real
She's
friend.
my rock. She's
As
my
we've
rock in
stepped
church.
away,
Wow.
she has been so kind and so inviting to just continue to act as if nothing's different.
Yeah.
So it's really great to see.
Yeah, she's amazing. I'm grateful for her. And we had all of our kids together, so it's really neat, like same age, same gender, so they were kind of raised together. But my teen years, a story that I did kind of want to tell. So I finally, had my group of friends, but then I met my friend. Her name's Brittany. So I met her, and she kind of established this like love of the gospel in me, almost like, oh, okay, I want to maybe turn my life around. I want to start being a better person. I want to start doing better. So I ended up going and talking to my bishop, trying to like clear my past, right? Clear my sins. And this is a memory that actually resurfaced kind of recently. I found myself crying on my closet floor in the bedroom and called Nick. So I went to him to sit down and try to get my life on track. So first thing he did is, of course, take the sacrament away. No sacrament. He took my temple recommend with a note that like I had to be on the temple trips so that I could see my friends go into the temple, and I would be on the outside.
So a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Shaming for sure.
Shame and guilt cycle. And then Miracle of Forgiveness. Had to read that and meet with him every week on each chapter. Which I actually had a funny experience there too, because one day one of my good friends who was not a member went with me up to the church. We were meeting on just like off day. And she sat in the car while I went in. And I came back out, and I mean, I was just a wreck. I'd been bawling my eyes out. She looked at me. She was like, "And why are you doing this?" And I was like, "Because this is what I need to do to get through all this and try and clear all the wrongs that I've done."
And just, if it's okay, just for people who've never been Mormon,
Yeah.
Mormons are taught, especially as they're teens and adults, that if they commit a sin like any sexual exploration, drinking, smoking, doing drugs, that the only way they can receive forgiveness, they cannot just pray to God and Jesus and get forgiveness. They have to, in your case, Amanda, you had to go sit alone
Yes.
with an adult bishop behind closed doors and do what?
Pretty much confess my life, all the wrongs that I'd done, and see what he told me to get my life back to where I could have the Spirit with me all the time and have pretty much the love of God with me.
And so when he takes the sacrament away, can you explain to people how that is shaming?
Well, we take the sacrament every Sunday at church in little sacrament trays of bread and water. So as you're sitting there with your family or your friends or whoever's around, people see that you're not taking the sacrament. So they obviously
Because you
know.
just pass the tray,
Pass the
by,
tray through.
and you don't take
I mean,
the bread and
sure,
water.
they may not be looking at you, but even if they're not, you feel like they are because it hurts so bad. I don't remember.
Yeah. So sorry, I was just
No, you're
wanting to
fine.
explain.
Yeah, explain it.
You're having, the bishop is the one that, quote, forgives you for God and Jesus, basically.
Yeah.
And it's a very shaming process that some say is inappropriate
Yeah.
for a teenage girl to be alone
definitely
with a guy
inappropriate.
talking about
Yeah.
sex.
Yes.
And then Christians will, like, let's just say mainstream Christians will say it's offensive that he's the broker between you and Jesus forgiving you.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
So you were in that shame parade, as I call it. You go ahead and keep.
Which actually brings up, ends up that I'm trying to do better, but I had a boyfriend at the time. We went a little too far with things, so I ended up meeting with him again. Well, actually, no, I ended up writing it down. My mom will probably laugh at this. Wrote it down in a journal like any girl would, right? She found my journal, and it was like the middle of the night. So she takes me and drives me to this bishop's house in the middle of the night, and we end up meeting in his living room.
Oh.
In his living room, yeah. And he reads all of those questions that you kind of were bringing up. Sexual things, like where did you touch him? Where did he touch you? I mean,
He has details, John.
very graphic things. And then by the time that I'm sitting there answering and get to the end, he tells me, oh, I had to ask you these questions because if, depending on your answer, your punishment would be greater. Because you have to punish me for my wrong sins, which also, in hindsight now, how awful that is.
Yeah.
And I want to clarify that I actually just told my parents the same story at Christmas, and they both cried with me because they were like, I had no idea. You're taught that this is what you do when you have a troubled teen. You take them to the bishop because that's how they can be fixed. So it's not like I place blame there, but it's definitely something that's not okay. And we have daughters, and my oldest daughter, we had a bishop as a family, and somebody that she didn't feel comfortable going in with. And it freaking breaks my heart so bad because she told me that she was uncomfortable with this person, and it let her go in. It let her go in to have a worthiness interview for a temple recommend. Like this man across from a freaking desk can deem her worthy of God. It's such a lie. But I still am mad at myself for not being like, I'm going to sit in there with her. Why did that not cross my mind? Well, because we're taught that it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
The conditioning is real,
it is.
right?
Yes.
And deep and abiding. So, yeah.
Christianity institutionalized guilt as a virtue is what they've done.
And it's part of a business model, because if you can get, as a teen or as a young adult, feeling horrible about yourself,
Yeah.
and that it's the church is the only way you can become a good person.
It's perpetual.
That the bishop and Jesus are the only ways for you to be forgiven and then become a good person. Well, then they've got you locked in. You're getting married in the temple. You're paying your tithing. You're serving in your callings, because you are now dependent on their approval and on their position between you and God.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah. 100%.
And even when you're saying things like troubled, I'd say like troubled in quotation marks,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Seriously.
Like a normal thing that most people face.
A normal thing, developmentally appropriate.
Yeah.
And also, honestly, you're coping, it sounds like both of you, with very real trauma.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely just trying to cope and get your needs met as like developing minds. Your brains are not even fully formed. You're just doing the best you can.
That's right.
And I told Nick, even a seed that was planted back then that I'm just now uncovering is one of the most hurtful things about sitting across from that bishop in his house that night, is that if he had the true power of God that he claimed to have, he should have been able to look into my eyes and see that this teen is going through this stuff because she has some kind of hurt, something in her that she needs to go through. And
That's right. You needed love and you needed care.
yeah.
And the
Not
church,
judgment.
I think the church kind of brags that they don't really have any formal training for bishops, that the bishops are just kind of, you're laughing. Is that true, Nick? Well, how much training did you, how much mental health training, how much formal training as a bishop?
Zero.
What?
Zero. The only mental health training I've had is I have the luxury of my career. I audiobook all day, every day. So I'm trying to learn things, and I listen to a lot of books on psychology, but zero. You want to know what they do? Signature cards are number one. You got to get those so tithing can be processed.
So that's temple recommends, you're saying? Or
Temple
no?
recommends tithing because you sign off on checks and everything. So signature, that's like number one thing.
Banking.
Banking.
That's so revealing.
Yeah.
That's
when
so...
you're called to be a bishop, like
yeah.
the number one thing is we have to get all the signature cards in and plugged in today so we can process tithing, because tithing's
The
coming in
monies.
that day. And,
So the church is on the spot with the money stuff.
Come on. I've got some fun stuff to tell. This is. But yes, you get some counsel. They meet with the wives. The Stake Presidency meets with the wives. And let's just give them some grace for a minute. They're young and have no flipping clue what they're doing either. They're just reading a handbook and saying, "Oh, it's in the handbook. This is the equivalent of the scriptures, brethren. Let's stick to this."
Yeah.
I can't stand it. And I refused to participate in the handbook part of the church. And anybody who knows me from my ward or Stake,
Yeah.
they know, well, that's 100% Nick.
Yeah.
He never played by those rules.
We'll get there. But when you're counseling an abuse victim,
Yes.
like you would just think, especially when you're deeming their worthiness before God, you'd think that they'd have some really formal training.
Yeah.
And
John, can I tell you what I would ask when young women come to me with this kind of stuff?
yeah, but we will get
We'll
to
get
that
there?
when we get to
Okay.
Yeah.
yours. I just don't want to derail Amanda's
You're good.
story. We
It's good.
remember?
We'll get
We
there.
remember that?
I remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Amanda, back to you.
Okay, so I guess we were trying to get to me meeting Nick, so that happened at a pretty.
Well, did you want to resolve how that
how
interactions
that-
with your bishop kind of?
So I think that's pretty much how it played out. I ended up going through everything, going through the full repentance process. So in my mind, like everything that I had before had been swiped away, although all the feelings are still there. But
Yeah.
so as I was going through that, and going through school and just trying to cling to the gospel the best I could because it felt like the right thing to do. Felt like what I was supposed to do. And now, I mean, I wouldn't have met him if it wasn't for that. So I'm definitely not ungrateful. And it made me a better person. It made me, even in hindsight, made me a better mom, But it was not easy going through it. You feel so alone because then you're taught to just you harbor it all inside. I'm really bad at that. I've gotten a lot better over the time. So just normal things as a youth, church activities on Wednesday night, Sundays, and then, church dances, temple trips, all that stuff. And like I said, I was an only child. So my parents would have the missionaries over. We had them over pretty much every Sunday to feed them, if not multiple times during the week, because like I said, there were not lots of members in my school. So they wanted me to, see these wonderful young men who are serving missions and have better examples than the boys I was dating in high school. So that's how we ended up coming to meet. I was young. I was 16 when I met Nick. I had graduated early. So me and my friend Brittany, actually, we made a trip out here to see BYU with my parents. And our plans were to graduate early and come to BYU. And we both ended up graduating early and getting married and having families. So, yeah.
Was that because getting married and starting families was
what was taught.
was emphasized for you?
It probably was emphasized in my mind, but it's also what I wanted. Personally, I've always wanted to have a lot of kids. I think that stems from me being an only child. I would have 10 more if we could.
True story, she would.
I
It was
love
me
children.
that was like, I can't.
We got 5, and I love my babies.
So really quickly, there are really strict rules about missionaries, having feelings for other, girls, men or women, girls or boys, about not dating on missions, about not, being there to serve the Lord and no one else. So do y'all want to talk about the
Heck yeah.
complexities of developing feelings for each other, Nick, while you're on a mission, and Amanda, while you're not supposed to be liking a missionary?
Do you want to go? You want me to go?
It doesn't matter.
I'll tell it. Okay, so yes, and here's the beauty of it. I feel no shame. I feel no guilt.
Now we don't.
Now. Felt it for years. And that's sad, but it's also quite beautiful in its own way. Oh gosh, I had the hots for her. We would go to their home. Her dad is just one of the more charismatic people you'll ever meet. Anybody who knows Terry Haney, they just love him. He's just a salt of the earth, Southern gentleman who is quite gifted in a number of fronts, but one of them is his ability to sit down at a piano and just play anything. He can't read music, but he's got a gift. And he would play for us, and we would cut it up, and it was like, this is the coolest guy alive. He's got a beautiful daughter. His wife is so fun. They have us over at our house, and her and I just started, I think we were playing a card game with the family once.
Yeah, we were playing card games.
And then we ended up playing a game called Speed.
I still have the cards.
She still has the cards. They were Coca-Cola cards. And it was her laugh and her smile that got me. It was contagious. And for people to come in and say, you're 21 or 20 years old, you're allowed to look once. Give me a break. What a joke.
There's that saying, if you this is an awful saying, but this is what I was told.
If you look once.
If you look once, do you want to tell it?
No, you tell it.
If you look once, you're not a man. If you look twice, you're not a missionary.
That's right.
Oh, I've never
I looked
heard
3
of
times,
that.
John. I looked a lot. Let's just say
Well, I mean, it's just what you're told.
it is what it is.
Margie,
Wow.
you seem surprised.
Oh, well, I've never heard of that.
No, neither.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, on the mission, it was said all the time. You know. So it started there. And guys, understand this. I was on my way home. I was 21 months out. I really worked hard. I was quite successful. In fact, I was one of the most successful missionaries when it came to numbers and baptisms in the mission, maybe even in the history of the mission. I don't even know. Don't care. It means nothing because it meant something to them. It means nothing to me. But my parents got a divorce at that time. And I don't want to make it sound like I was clinging for something, looking for something. No. But there was a sense of solace and peace I gained from her mom and dad and her through the trial of, I carried in my front pocket a family picture of my oldest brother when he was married at the Salt Lake Temple. It was a family portrait and it was tattered, but I kept it for 2 years. I showed it with almost everybody. This is my family. This is my eternal family. I took pride in it. And all of a sudden that 21 months of preaching that particular thing was completely taken from me. And I was hurting. And to my rescue came my sweet wife.
So did that particular, did that happen on your mission?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
wow.
21
While you
months
were
out.
serving.
Yeah, I got an email from my dad on a P-Day. I'd heard things weren't great, but I had no idea. And it was pretty brief. It was, hey, your mom's filed for a divorce. I love you. Sorry to tell you this. So I went home and I called him. What's going on? Didn't ask the mission president. Didn't care because I was that guy. I didn't play by rules like most. I never have.
And just for those who don't know, what were the rules about calling home when you were a missionary?
Mother's Day and Christmas.
Twice a year you could call home, and you couldn't
would
receive calls.
They would try to give you a time limit. Nobody ever obeyed that unless they were just complete prudes, you know.
But that was one of the cultiest things about Mormon missions
100%.
that they just changed a couple of years ago. You could only call home twice a year.
Twice a year.
Yeah.
That's it. And other than that, it's letters. And who in the heck, when they're 19, 20 years old, wants to write a handwritten letter to their family? At least I didn't. I'm not a writer. So
I
it was
got
hard.
one,
Yeah.
and I just found it the other day. I totally
You wrote
forgot
one?
he wrote it. Remember the one I read you?
Oh, yeah.
He wrote me one when he moved from our area before going home.
I had an
Look,
inspired
he
mission
wrote me a
president.
letter.
Yeah, he transferred me, the last transfer, and I'm so glad he did because I was getting hot and heavy with her. Not hot and heavy in the sense that, like, sex, none of that, but I was pushing the envelope. I wanted to kiss her, you know? I wanted to spend more days on P-days or on Sundays at their house than in the field working.
And the other rule is that missionaries can never be alone with anyone. They have to always be with their companion.
Yeah.
So how did you spend time with her while you had a companion with you all the time?
I had a cool-ass companion.
Oh, yeah.
Can I say that?
Yeah.
Sorry. I had a really cool companion, Jacob Campbell.
Meaning
I hope
he
he's
let you
watching.
what? He let, like,
I was training him, but he was a good kid, and he understood. He knew what I was going through, and he was there for me. What's sad is I wasn't there for him sometimes too. I was selfish. I was learning. But yeah, we did that thing. I kissed her. And I
on your
liked it.
mission as a missionary.
You better believe it. I laid it on her. And here's the other thing, John. I told her I was going to come back and marry her. And I did.
Oh, he did.
You know? And I bet people are rolling their eyes right now in the church. Guys,
He got home. When did you get home?
I still got called to be a bishop. I still helped a lot of people. Didn't make me a bad person.
Yeah.
We have 5 beautiful kids. We've had 6 children. The first was a stillborn. We had to deliver little Savannah Jane, bury her, which we can tell that story later. But We have no regrets in how we met.
Yeah. Anything you want to share about that, Amanda, in terms of your memories?
Oh, no, I think that's all perfect. I knew when he opened the chapel door for me the first time he was transferred to our ward. He opened the door and held it open with that big smile he has, and I told him, that's when I just knew. I was like, something about this guy I like. And
Yeah.
So when your mission ended, how did you?
I called her mom, and I said I want her to come to Utah. And I got home on
Wait,
December.
immediately when you're 24,
John,
you finished honorably.
I'm 21 years old, John. I need to get married, right?
The focus.
I mean, the focus is we have to
real.
have a family brewing. You know, she should already have some kind of immaculate birth by now.
Daylight's burning.
And so, you know, in Mormonism, masturbation, pornography, all those things are bad. So when you're 21 years old and your hormones are raging, what do? You hurry up and get married.
Yeah. There
So
really
you don't
is only
sin.
one
So you
outlet.
don't commit, you know,
Sit next to murder.
That's right.
basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so he got home, and I came out Christmas Day. You came
Christmas
home,
Day.
I don't remember what day in
Christmas
December you
Day.
got
To
home.
Utah?
To Utah.
Mm-hmm.
So your family was in Utah at the time?
I got home to a broken home. My dad had just moved out. My mother was working for a dentist, and the house was all in boxes. The home that I lived in before my mission, I slept on the floor on a blanket my very first night home. And we moved the very next day. So I helped my mom pack up and move into an apartment.
Wow.
And it was a tough time.
Yeah, that's rather brutal.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that I was really in a hurry to get back to her and to get married and to move on with my life, because this thing, there was nothing there for me. But she came up. I got home December 18th, 2003. She came Christmas Day, 25th. That was fun.
Amanda, you said, so he calls. Do you want to tell the story from your perspective?
He got with my mom and got me, got a plane ticket out.
To Utah.
So I was there Christmas
And
Day.
you were 16?
No,
I was
17.
17 then?
almost 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Don't say 16. That might look bad. I'm 4 years
It's
to the day
barely
older than
18 when
she
we
is,
were
just so
married.
you know.
Okay.
so I
We
stayed
were all
out there.
legal before anything like that happened.
Okay. So you're 17.
Yeah. And we stayed out. I stayed out 17 days with him, and then flew back home. And by did you come January or February?
I came 2 weeks
January,
later.
yeah.
You stayed 18 days.
January.
It was exactly 18 days.
And then we were engaged February 7th.
yeah.
And then we were married April 1st.
Oh, wow.
And I turned 18 in February. Our birthdays are February 25th. So I turned 18 February 25th. And
You
we
guys
were
didn't mess
married-
around.
Yeah. Married April 1st.
John, I had no job, had no income.
Yeah,
My mother had just come out of a divorce, and she had some jewelry that she didn't care anything for, so I sold it. I hawked it all and got a wedding ring for her. So I owe my mother everything for the ring. We're not talking right now, and I'd like to maybe mention my parents at some point. Not right now, but I love them. I really do. I know me being on this show is really hurtful to them because of how they're probably viewed by their ward members, by their family members. It's got to be extremely difficult. And I want them to know that I'm sorry if I've made that hard for them. But I feel that this is what I have to do, what we have to do.
I think those are some of the toughest situations to be in relationship where for you, the thing to do is healing, and the healing thing for you hurts someone you love. Yeah.
Yeah,
So was it a temple marriage?
it was.
Which temple?
Salt Lake Temple.
Okay.
You want to talk about that? Can I talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay, I had the hots for her. I mean, who doesn't? And
That's palpable.
it is.
We're feeling it.
So, were we perfect before we left, or before we got married in the temple? Absolutely not. I went to Mississippi. I asked her to marry me. I lived in the same house with her.
In the room next door.
In the room next to her. And her parents were ignorant enough to think that I wouldn't sneak into her room at night to make out. Right?
Love
They
you, Mom and
trusted me. They should have put
You got some very important data.
yeah, they should have put a lock on
On
the
each
other side
other.
of the doorknob and not let me out. But then again, she would have probably been, but we weren't sexually active, but we definitely got heavy in our affection for each other. How can you not?
And how did that feel
Wonderful.
to you even at the time? Yeah, did it feel
Well, both. Wonderful
Both.
and total
Okay.
guilt.
Shame, guilt,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it was like, why? Because I love her. I know that I'm going to be with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what was so interesting. It was like once I put the engagement ring on her finger, it became more real. Like, kissing and just having somewhat of a courtship is one thing. But when you are set to be married, all of a sudden it takes a whole nother level that it amps things up. And thank goodness we only had a month and a half of that before we were married. But yeah, we messed around. Sure we did.
Well, what makes you feel like you want to even feel like you need to say that now?
I want to talk about this because of the shame that we felt for 7 years before we fixed it with a bishop.
Okay.
I'd like to get to that.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell that story.
No, exactly. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I didn't want you to feel like you had to confess to me, right?
Well, no, that may have come out wrong, John. I wasn't saying it like that. So, prime example, Savannah Jane, we get pregnant when we were, gosh, honey, 6 months married, maybe?
Yeah, I was 19.
She was 19.
Had Luke at 20.
And we have a little girl that has a thing called cystic hygroma and Turner syndrome. And we found out at about 5.5, 6 months that she probably wouldn't make it. And we had a number of tests done, and it was an emotional time for us. But the worst part of it was the shame and the fear that because we fooled around a little before we were married, that our daughter would not be able to be sealed to us because of our imperfections.
Oh, I see.
Or even feeling like that's maybe why it happened.
Yeah,
Or
like you're
that's
being
why.
Had those
punished.
Yeah, you're being punished.
Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Did y'all try to even to repent or confess to the bishop?
No.
Because
Had too
what
much
did
pride.
you feel? This is important. So, what did you feel would be the consequences of being honest with your bishops? Just so people can understand that marital stress.
Complete
when a
embarrassment.
couple confesses any sort of sexual behavior with their Mormon bishops after getting engaged, but before the temple wedding, what can happen, and then what are the results of that? Just for those who've never been Mormon,
Well, you could not be able to get married.
meaning they would
You'd have to push off
all
your
the
wedding.
announcements are sent out for the non-Mormons to tell them what happens.
That's exactly what happened. And we knew, and the bishop who was there is a good guy, but I know how he would have responded to this. It would have been, hey, we're going to have to put this thing on hold.
Which then tells everyone.
They've messed
what's
up,
happened.
which is an embarrassment, right? And pride, fear, all of those emotions we were feeling. And we just kept telling each other, you know what? We'll do this. We'll get married, and then we'll fix it. And well, that went on for what, 7 years till we had Opie?
Yep.
7 years.
7 years of
Wow.
feeling guilt off and on for that.
Yeah.
It lived
That's
in
so
you.
long.
We wouldn't
Then
even talk
lives
about
in
it with
your
each other.
relationship,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it was always hanging over us. It was just so unhealthy. And we finally fixed it with a bishop who I love. I loved him. And he helped us feel a sense of what would you call it? Closure for
the
it?
guilt, I
Yeah.
guess.
And he was so kind. There was no punishment.
He was.
He said, whatever you guys have done, you've paid for and then some. And that bothers me now that I think about it because it's not penance. That's actually counter to Mormon doctrine in a lot of ways. Well,
Yeah.
some Mormon doctrine in a lot of ways. Mormon doctrine is very
Did you know how anxious we were to even talk to him 7 years later?
Oh, my goodness.
Like we were shaking.
shaking, terrified.
And that's just a lot of sadness and trauma
Yeah.
that you shouldn't,
Stress.
and stress that you shouldn't have to bring into your first 7 years of marriage, right?
Where it's so hard anyway. There's so much
So
to
many other things
yeah.
you're learning in that process of life.
And it makes you wonder if your marriage was legitimate, if Heavenly Father,
Yeah.
and then if anything bad happens, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Suffering. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, on one hand, you're really happy, like, that you had a bishop, be decent, I'd
Yeah.
say. But on the other hand, it still plays into the systemic problem
Yes.
of, like, why are we
Even here.
having other people deem us worthy or not? Why? Either way, it's so deeply problematic. Yeah.
And this informs how you bishop as a verb later on.
Yes.
So
I
I
can
think these
imagine.
stories are important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All these experiences taught me how to be better
Yeah.
and to not abuse those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into the woods and sit here and brag on myself of how, but I'm going to share some of those things because I know there are current bishops who are TBMs, true believing members, who need to change the way they do things
Yeah.
and stop shaming people.
We'll get there for sure. Margie.
Quick question. Your young coupleness, like when you think back to your early days, how would you describe what like qualities you either valued in each other or were driving you forward? You know what I mean? It's like we're together because we want to create this thing, or this is what our love's about. Or if there was like a snapshot of you guys in those young years, how would you describe that?
Go ahead, babe.
I feel like Nick, for me, and he knows this, was like my saving grace. Like I had been waiting for this person to help me kind of get out of the dark space I was in. And he did that for me, along with, which I've told him recently, I'm like the person I was before we met versus the person I've been for the last 20 years in the gospel. Like I literally clung to, I found this amazing guy who I love so much, who's a return missionary. So for me to be able to keep him, like I've got to stay on this straight and narrow path. So in my own head, like I almost made a covenant with the Lord, like I will never mess up again in my entire life if you let me keep him and our future family. Like I'll do anything, that was just the way I thought. So this past, 20 years, that's how I've been. And this past 6 months to a year, I'm like learning how to get myself back.
Yeah.
Like the free-spirited self that I love so much. Not that I didn't love that 20 years. I loved it. Loved being a mom and raising my kids. And if I could do it again, I would, 100%. But I'm like, wow, this is the me that I've been missing, though, because all the things of the church like suppressed who I really was before, I don't even know if that fully answers the
That
question.
so
but-
makes sense. Yeah, resonating hard.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Can you re-ask the question for me just so I think I know where we're going with it?
Well, one thing I kind of felt from you as an example of this was like almost a desire to create your own family, your own, like in moving in, there was this drive to like, let's start new, like let's create an environment that's our own where we're starting over. But I was just asking when you came together if there were certain things that came to mind right now that you're like, this really brought us together and this was really like a propelling agent in our relationship, these things.
What were the core values of the relationship?
I'll tell you this. We have 5 children. I remember Luke, the oldest, and Sydney, the youngest. And the rest is a big giant blur for me. Because I had it in my head that I needed to go out and conquer the financial world so that Amanda and I eventually could go serve missions with each other.
Wow.
We could be mission presidents. And people say not to aspire in the church. That's just a bunch of bull honky. They all aspire to callings.
Yeah.
The first thing I felt when I was called to be bishop, I'll just share this really quickly, was relief. And most people are like, oh, it's such a heavy thing. Yeah, it is. But the very first feeling I thought was, oh, finally. Now my mom's family and my dad's family will finally accept me because of a calling.
Wow.
So in my mind, I was always reaching for a future day to be present rather than the present day.
Yeah.
And I missed my life
Yeah.
because of that. She, on the other hand, is gifted on the other side of things. She's always been trying to bring me in. Hey, this is where it's at. It's like music. You know, you listen to a song, to get to the end, to enjoy it? Because in Mormonism, that's what it is.
Absolutely.
Like, think celestial. Well, let's wait till the end of the song so we can enjoy the music. And to me, it's like, and this is recent for me in my mind, just to have this paradigm shift of realizing, quit looking for some future day because there isn't one.
Yeah.
There's now. So enjoy the music
Yeah.
and dance, have fun, eat, drink, and be merry. Absolutely.
Yeah. And don't you think there's even a shift from, like, I feel like what Mormonism says is endure. Like, joy is not even in there. It's like
Yeah.
you just
Endure to the
suffer
end.
suffer through it for another day. So I think it's deeply, deeply ingrained.
That's what I was going to say earlier. Suffering is going to happen. It is just a law of nature. But the unnecessary suffering, that is tragic. And what we were feeling for 7 years because we had some petting, and that was it. And we felt that we were damned, and our 3 children were not going to be sealed to us, but to somebody else because of what we had done when we were kids.
Yeah.
It's not healthy.
Yeah.
It's just not healthy, and it needs to end.
Right.
The
Okay.
shame has to end. The guilt has to end.
So in your answer, I'm kind of hearing that those early years you were deeply stressed and kind of in a hustle mode, like trying to build a life, and all that meant achieve to this place where you perceived yourself as more stable financially, also in all the ways, kind of status, and in the church in particular.
I'm like the perfect storm. The abuse that occurred in my upbringing, mixed with just my ambition and drive of just go and work hard and do the hard thing all the time, Nick. You have to do the hard thing. It's just a lie. But that's what blinded me from really being present with my wife and kids for so many years.
Amanda, I'm going to ask you a question about your temple experience really quick.
Okay.
So when you went through the temple, when you were married in the temple, you both would have made covenants to God in the temple, in the Mormon temple, you know, the law of consecration or the law of obedience or the law of sacrifice. I'm rusty on all the temple covenants, but there's a bunch of
I've got you,
covenants.
John.
What?
The law of sacrifice,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
law of consecration,
Yeah.
the law of chastity,
Yeah.
and what is it? The gospel of repentance? Is it repentance?
Yeah. Those.
Repentance.
So when you, it's been a while.
It's already getting foggy for me.
Yeah.
As he says.
So when you were making those covenants in the temple, the way that it was until just a couple of years ago, is that he would make those covenants with God in the temple, but then you
covenant
would
to your
make,
husband.
you as the wife would make covenants to him.
Yeah.
Did that even, having you speak so thoughtfully about how much he meant to you and how you were telling God, just let me keep him and I'll be righteous forever.
Yes.
Did that imbalance even register to you at the time, or were you super happy to covenant?
It did not register at first. No. I mean, I'm sure it registered years later. The first time, I don't even remember much of anything because
Yeah.
everybody tells you, don't worry about the weird stuff. Just focus on how you feel. And I'm like, well, I feel great. I'm marrying the love of my life. Like, it's my wedding day. And actually, this one hit me hard leaving the church because I saw actually a TikTok video of a lady like putting on all her temple clothes, but saying all the things that the temple took from their wedding. And it hit me and I just cried. I'm like, I never even thought of it that way. It's not recorded. Like, you don't have vows. Your first kiss is not even on picture. A lot of people, like friends, couldn't come for me, you know. Some of my family couldn't be there. And I'm like, so actually, instead of like centering and uniting the family the way they say they are, we're actually tearing the family down. Like, how would you not want your whole family at your wedding?
Yeah.
But you just blindly okay it because
you don't know what you don't know.
the whole temple thing has hit me so hard. And it's been really hard being here, like flying in. I told Nick, I was like, man, this hurts my heart. It's the first time I've flown here and not been so excited to see like the temples and everything church related.
Yeah.
But then I told him driving here too, I'm like, but it's like new eyes. It's a beautiful thing, because I was looking at the mountains and I'm like, God made these beautiful mountains and we're thinking that we have to make these beautiful buildings to worship him. And in my opinion, that's creating an idol of worship. We're creating these beautiful buildings for God. He doesn't care if we worship him in the temple. I've said this to so many friends lately because they're like, where are you going to go? What church are you going to go to? I'm like, my backyard. That's where I'm going to go. God doesn't care if I worship him in the church, in the temple, or in my backyard. And I feel him way stronger in my backyard than I feel him anywhere else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's
We have
kind
a
of
cool backyard.
long explanation.
Well, thanks for sharing. Okay, so y'all did 5 kids, and Nick, you were focusing on becoming a breadwinner, and Amanda, you were raising the kids.
You were maximizing all your in relationship twos, right?
Yes.
Not to yourself, but your value is like very much in mothering and
For
being a
sure.
partner.
We didn't have a
100%.
marriage because of that. I'll tell you. We almost ended our marriage at 13, almost 14 years because of it.
We never
Oh,
made
so-
time for us.
We didn't date. We were roommates. We had sex. That was it. Honestly, it was like, okay, you're there and I'm here and we're just grinding this thing out and we're serving in callings. I think at the time I was Elders Quorum president. Was I Elders Quorum president, Young Men's president?
Both.
Both.
Yeah,
Yeah, all of those things, right? For 20 years I've been in the ward council and not been, you know. But
driving separate to church.
driving
it's-
separate to church, not sitting together.
Yeah.
It's just years of separation. And
Yeah.
you know, one of the things that the church, at least not necessarily the church, but some of the leaders of the church say, date your wife. And I agree 1,000%. Do it weekly, because you can go down a path that leads to just complete misery and unnecessary suffering, which turns to nihilism and resentment and bitterness and everything in between.
Yeah, I've spoken with many ex-bishops, ex-stake presidents, or children of bishops and stake presidents in Mormonism. And it's like, between getting married so young, all the financial pressure of being the sole breadwinner in your family, having so many kids, and then all the service in the church, you have no time for yourself or for your marriage. And so weirdly, sometimes those that are most successful in the church, especially as men, but also as women, they're the ones that sometimes neglect their spouse and their kids the most. And that's a weird irony of Mormonism, because the church does seem to care so much about families and definitely markets that they care so much about families.
Right.
But if you're living the model Mormon life, it just seems like you're not being the spouse and the parent that you really should be. Do I have that wrong? Do you want to fill that in?
John, it never even occurred to me that way. But now that you say it, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you described exactly what I felt, and I just hadn't been able to put it into words.
Yeah. Yeah. To be the best Mormon you can be, you sometimes have to neglect your marriage and your kids.
And sooner or later, it's going to come to a head.
And I've met kids that are very resentful. Their dad was GA or stake president or whatever, but they're resentful because they feel like the church took their parents from them in their most
kids are
important
so
formative
happy right now.
years.
Yeah.
Because they have their dad in a fully different way now. And it's been beautiful to see.
I'm present with my kids. It's been a gift for me. I get emotional thinking about it because I've worried so much about some future day that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
the present is where it's at.
But you said kids 2, 3, and 4 were kind of a blur.
I don't remember it. I remember the days they were born, John, but I kid you not, I don't, like, she'll tell me things and I'm just like, I don't know, honey. I'm sorry, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And I have a very good memory, but I was trying so hard to do all the right things, and that actually ends up being the fog that licks you. Trying. That's the problem. Stop trying and just be.
Yeah.
So I'll ask each of you this question. So how happy were you, Nick, not knowing any different? How happy were you in those first 10, 15 years as a striving Mormon who was also trying to build a business and have so many kids? Were you happy? Were you miserable? Were you
No.
even conscious?
I think I would say not being conscious would be more of a description. I was happy. I had great laughs, great friends, great moments.
I mean, it
in all
doesn't
of
suck
that.
to build a successful business, right?
No, and that's there, kind of. I mean, I'm trying to figure that out as I go. You know, people say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I don't know. I just anything. I'm good as long as they eat and they're happy.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'll live in a teepee. I don't care. But I know them, and I'm not going to sleep on them.
Yes.
So I've made dang sure that they're safe and that they're protected and that they'll always have food on the table. That will never change, no matter what.
What I am feeling so hard as you're talking, like from you, this idea of like what happens when we are trying to live a formula or some type of a prescriptive kind of life. And it's that the people around you aren't real. They aren't like, they don't live and breathe and have, and it's not like you're choosing. It's not like that. But when you're talking now, that's what I'm feeling from you is like my loved people are real to me. I connect with them. I know what they would love, what they don't love, what they enjoy. And that's kind of now more of your emphasis and what you care about. It's just that your loved ones, they live and breathe to you. They're alive to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money doesn't matter anymore. And it's not because I have boatloads of it. We're fine. And we'll be fine. But it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Being present with my wife, with my children, and with the people who I trust, the real friends. They've made themselves known more now in the recent weeks than ever before.
It can be a filter, can't it?
Yeah, it's painful, but it's beautiful at the same time.
Okay, so going back to your happiness living the model Mormon life in the South, you're saying it was a
John,
fog.
I've never
It was-
thought this. I've
yeah.
never thought about this. So give me a minute on it.
No, it's okay. Amanda, do you want to ask? Because I think
No, let me answer it.
okay,
Let me answer
okay.
it. I don't know that I ever thought that way. I just went. But the reasons why were some future day of service. That's why I did it. Not because I aspired to be a mission president I just wanted to do the right thing and to serve people who were less fortunate than us. And if I could do all of that properly, that would be the life I could hang my hat on. And now I just want to throw up when I think about it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a very disconnected personal, like to yourself experience.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Amanda, your turn. How was being a stay-at-home Mormon mom for you, knowing that you love your kids,
Yeah.
you know?
I loved it. Like 100%. I've loved being able to be home with my kids, which we kind of made that before we got married. Because my parents both did work all the time to support just our little family, just my mom, my dad, and me. They worked their booties off my whole life to just make sure that I had enough. But we kind of made that before and said, when we start having kids, I want to be home, even if it means we don't have the things we want or need. I want to be home with the kids. So I definitely found happiness through it. I mean, I had my moments like everybody else where I definitely would feel depressed or have a depression or have a faith crisis. And, you know, living with the mastermind over here, I always felt like my faith crisis was because I never felt kind of at Nick's level with just church doctrine or church reading or church knowledge in general, which now has turned out to be a blessing to me in the moment. So in my deconstruction has been a little, I wouldn't say easier, but he has to deconstruct, I feel like, so much more than I have to.
Are you saying you had a faith crisis before he did?
Oh, I've had faith crisis off and on probably our whole, just little faith crisis, you know, feeling like,
I love that. Just a little faith crisis.
yeah, feeling like
in
I'm
what
not good
areas?
enough, or I'm not the best mom, or I'm not the best wife, or I'm not reading my scriptures enough. We're not praying together as a family enough. I mean, plenty faith crises through the last 20 years, but I always just clung to feeling better now. So we'll push through. And
I will say this, when you use the term faith crisis, I think it's such a broad thing in today's world. With Amanda doubting historicity of the narrative that has been created, I don't know that she's ever been there, if that's what you're referring to as a faith crisis. But
Yeah.
Could be anything.
if it's one of those things where she's steadily always checking herself,
yeah, to see if you're doing it.
absolutely. Yeah.
Like, and in checking yourself, is that the idea of you're measuring yourself and
My
noting
worth.
that you are not enough?
Yeah.
You are failing somewhere on the
Somewhere.
list. And that is so by
to try to
design,
do
right?
better. Yeah.
But it's happening, it sounds like. So that comes up every once in a while.
Yeah.
And then somehow you kind of work through it. You begin again.
Yeah.
And then so kind of
I feel like
cyclical
as
a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like wife and mom in general, you probably do that, you know, regardless. But yeah, I did it in all aspects of my life for sure, religiously included.
Like a faith crisis in yourself,
Yeah,
your
in
worthiness,
myself,
your
my
performance
worthiness. Yeah. Yep.
as a Mormon
Feeling
mother
good
and
enough.
wife.
Yeah.
I feel like that's so relatable.
How so? Can I ask that?
Hey,
Am I
you
allowed
can't
to
ask the questions. We ask the questions.
I just want to know. I'm learning.
I'm kidding.
I know that.
I'm kidding. Margie, go ahead. I was joking.
Well, I would just say, speaking particularly with women, I won't, but I notice that comes up a lot, I think, within our space and the role given to us through Mormonism. There's so much involved there that most people can't do the list. The list is longer and more involved than any human can do. And at any point, we're failing at something. So the blame can always be on us if we're experiencing something hard or if we're not getting the results that we want. So I just feel like that's almost by design. It's inherent to the structure of Mormonism and the role of, particularly, let's just say, women.
Yeah.
Yeah. It keeps us, like John said, going back because we're always at some point unworthy.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. So anything else about your individual lives or your Mormon family's lives leading up to your being called as bishop that you think is an important part of your story?
No, we were faithful members. We served. She served as a primary. She's the best primary president I've ever seen. In Young Women's Organization, she served everywhere, and I've done the same. Not to give you a list of callings because it just seems like it's some way of measuring our.
But it was everything. Like, it was everything to us.
It was
Even
everything.
my dad said it when this happened. He's like, I've told y'all so many times, you can take a break. Like, you can take a weekend off. You can take a vacation with your kids. Where we were like, no, we can't. Like, this is what we said we're going to do, and we'll be there the best we can. If we're sick, like, that might justify us having a little time off. But
Yeah, I missed 2 Sundays as a bishop. One I had the flu, and the other I was here. That's it. We were there. We were in.
Wow.
Really quickly, what was the relationship, the power dynamic between you two in the family and in the relationship? You know, in I guess a rigid Mormon family structure, it's sort of patriarchal, where the the man decides and the man rules and this is in the Proclamation of the Family, that the husband presides and the mom nurtures the kids. Those are like the main, if I'm remembering right, those are the main responsibilities.
Can I say?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Nick has never been like that. He's always wanted me to step up and voice my opinion and talk. And it's something that I've struggled with individually on my own, probably because of the idealistic things there. But he has never, ever once been like that. And one thing he keeps saying now is, I wish that you would have talked like this before now. I love hearing you talk. So that's been something that's actually strengthened our relationship, not just now, but probably over the past 7 or 8 years. Just me feeling like I can step up because I am worthy to. I have the strength to.
I'm going to tell on her for a minute. When we were first married, I asked her to order a pizza once, and we got into a little bit of a fight over it because she was so scared to pick up the phone and talk to a stranger.
Yes.
This is the person that I'm married. It's not the person that I know now, not even close. So I believe, if anything, we've done the opposite of a patriarchal order in our home.
Okay. That's maybe some Mormon families do that and some don't, but it's beautiful, beautiful.
I think
to
it's
hear.
developed over time, though, John. I think as it started in our relationship, maybe I was more of that, even though she's saying I wasn't. I'm sure I came from, because in my home, that was always the story. My mother was, ask your father. Your father is the presiding patriarch of the home. He makes the final say-so in everything that happens. And I don't know that I was ever uneasy about that growing up, but I was definitely uneasy with it when I became, married to Amanda. It just doesn't seem right. So she's always had a voice, but she would never voice it. That's what I was getting at with the whole pizza thing. But now she voices it, and it's beautiful, and it just makes me more excited to be with her.
Because he was the one, like the kids would always go to Dad for church Christians in particularly, because I'd be like, go ask your dad. He'll have the right answer for that. And not long ago, I had a sweet time with my girls in the hammock outside, and we actually had an amazing church discussion. And my middle daughter was like, Mom, why don't you talk like this more? You always send us to Dad. So that was like a beautiful experience for me to just be like, hey, I can do this too. Like, I have a voice and an opinion. But
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. All right. So you both are in it to win. How many years, again, were you married before you were called as bishop?
We've been 18 years, 17 or 18.
17 and a half.
17 probably, 17 and a half years. Not
Okay.
even and a half. I was called June 2nd, 2021.
Yeah.
So 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, it's just over 2.5 years before
Okay.
I stepped down. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, receiving the call.
Yeah.
Should we go there?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
So the stake president came to our home. I had kind of assumed it was probably happening. It wasn't time for the previous bishop to step down, but just a number of things had kind of occurred, and I guess they felt that it was right that a change needed to be made. So it was. He came to our home, and let me tell you, the stake president is a dear friend of mine. We've been friends for years, and so it was special. He sat down on our couch with Amanda and I and issued the call. And it was an emotional thing. Like I said earlier, it was relief. First feeling was relief, if I'm completely honest, which I try to be. And many people say, oh, that's Nick. He's so arrogant. He's this, that, and the other. No, it's just the truth. And it's probably the truth that they're not willing to confront. But I finally felt like I could be accepted by people who I typically wouldn't have been.
Like you made it. You were legitimate.
validated me.
You validated me.
It gave me a validation
Legitimizes.
of having a seat at the table when in any other form. And what was so fascinating was my grandmother on my mother's side died like 4 weeks after I was called to be bishop. And I'm telling you, at the funeral, it was like I was the biggest deal there. And maybe they'll say that I wasn't because they're mad at me right now. But it was like, Nick's a bishop.
Yeah.
Bishop. Hey, so-and-so over here was a bishop once. And all of a sudden it was this phony backslapping, Hey, Bishop, how are you, Bishop? Oh, I'm good, Bishop. Good, Bishop. Kind of thing going on, right? And so it felt good to get that kind of attention. Absolutely.
For sure.
I fed into it 100%. But then things started to happen.
Marty, you wanted to say something really quick.
I was curious in that moment too, if there, just because you both have talked about shame and the role of shame in your relationship over years, did that come up? Did it feel absolving?
Oh, yeah.
Like, did it feel kind of like,
I love that question. Do you want to answer?
Like to take the sting away from the sins you
Yeah.
had committed before.
I wouldn't have thought of that before. But
Yeah. I didn't have a bunch of, sins in my life. I cuss like a sailor because I swing a hammer for a living. And every now and then the thumb gets hit. I say some things. But I didn't ever feel like I was guilty for cussing. My moral compass was intact in even the eyes of Mormonism for the most part.
how about for your past selves though? I think that's what's hard sometimes.
It was
in
validating
worthiness.
for that. Yeah.
Like our past selves continue to live on in Mormonism, even if our behavior or belief has changed.
Well,
Do you feel that?
Yeah, because even if you sat down like we did after 7 years of being married and repented of this thing before we were married, there's still a hint of, was that really fixed or was it not? Right? Mm-hmm. And so when you get called to be a bishop, it's like, oh, that definitely is gone. Because they definitely wouldn't have called me. Because here's the thing, you get a letter from the First Presidency signed by them.
Meaning the prophet and his two counselors.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it's got your name on it, and you've been prayed over, and you are the man. Like, that's what happens. I've got the dang, I should have brought it. It's well written. And whether they signed it, I doubt it, honestly. But if they did, great. Man, yeah. See, this is opening up so many things for me in my mind. It validated me where I felt like I wasn't on so many fronts.
Yeah.
Because basically the prophets speak for God. So God made you bishop.
You better believe
right?
it.
Yeah.
Is that how you felt?
It's exactly what I felt.
Yeah.
Yes.
You too, Amanda?
yeah,
That makes sense.
My daughter, our 8-year-old, now 9-year-old, she came out to me by the fire the other night because it's always been a thing in our house. Like, as long as you stay true to the gospel, like that's all we care about, And so in her mind, like that's what she asked me. She's like, "Do you remember that time when we sat on the sofa and you and Dad said, just as long as y'all stay true to the gospel so we can be a family forever?" And I was like, oh, it was a huge jab to my heart. But we sat there and we talked about it. And that was one of the things that she brought up. What about the prophet? And I was like, what about the prophet? Do you think in this whole world of people that there's only one person that God would choose to speak for him? And as her 9-year-old little self said, she was like, "No, Mama." And I was like, "And do you think that on any chance that he is any better than your sweet soul is?" And she was like, "No." I was like, okay, that's all we needed to deconstruct that little part. I was like, you can talk to me about anything, because it's hard for them too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Okay, so you got that validation and you start serving as bishop. We talked about training. How much training did you get?
What was it, honey? 30, 40 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
She was there for it. That was the training we got.
Wait, can
In
I
the
just
house, you
shift
mean?
for a minute to Amanda in this? Like, Amanda, what did you feel in the moment? What were the emotions or feelings that you had as he was extended this call?
Yeah.
And did you have any feelings about your effort and work level likely going up or it affecting how much time you had with him?
Yeah.
And was it validating to you?
It was, for sure. Because we're in, Mississippi, and we're like, okay, we're called to this. We're going to do our best, and we're going to try to grow the gospel here in our little area of Mississippi. So we were both really proud and felt validated. I didn't worry as much about how much time it would take from him because I feel like he's been gone so much over the years, building up to this. So I felt like this is what was going to happen next sooner or later. So, like, for us, it was a really good day, really good couple of days. We went to the temple and had a great day together. Yeah, it all felt really good. It's like you were on cloud nine almost for at least a week.
Right. It's like you've been crowned.
Yeah.
You've
That's
arrived.
true.
Yeah.
Is that the Atlanta temple?
No, Baton
No,
Rouge is our
Baton Rouge,
closest.
Yep. Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah. Our closest temple is about a 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, any other questions, Margie, for Amanda? Okay. Okay. So you get the call. Not a lot of training. Do you
No.
want to just give our Never Mormons like a 1-minute overview of what a bishop's responsible for? Mormon bishop.
Yeah. Gosh, why don't I pull it up in the handbook? I don't have it memorized anymore.
Just generally, just the main things.
They're over the funds, welfare, common judge in Israel, which is the one I have the biggest issue with. And I'll elaborate on that. They preside over the meetings. It's another thing that drives me crazy is that they would make me take the sacrament before anyone. It was one of the things that just made me cringe. Couldn't do it. I'm no different than anyone else. But in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do.
You decide who gets what calling. Is
Absolutely.
that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yes. We decide on who serves, where they serve, how it's done. They leave it up to the discretion of the bishop and his counselors to make all of those decisions. We sit on a stand in church on a Sunday, and everybody is literally waiting on us to give the command.
And then if a marriage is in trouble in your ward, what does the couple?
We were called to give them counsel, and
the couple would come to you.
The couple would come to me. A construction worker, literally, a construction worker, John. I have big meaty hands because I've swung a hammer for 20 years. That's it. But all of a sudden, what I have to say is validated in their eyes to save their marriage. That's a weight in and of itself that most people just don't even consider.
Is it overreaching to say that a Mormon believes that their bishop speaks for God?
No, that's accurate. Without question.
When a young couple comes to you or an old couple or whatever, and they're seeking advice, and then you give advice, how is that received in when they go back home?
Well, I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the side of me being the bishop and also being on the other end of it. You take what they say to heart. You live it. And then you sit back and wait to see the fruits of it.
Yeah. And then repentance, right? If somebody makes a mistake or feels like they've done sin, what's your role as bishop?
To give them some sense of reconciliation, to feel like they're made whole again, to let them know that they're good enough. This triggers me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get really angry when I talk about this.
And that is your version, right? That's your sense of, Other bishops clearly have
others
some
see it differently. Yeah, I know these bishops. I've served with them. I love them. I don't agree with them.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I would never join forces with that mentality.
That's right. And that this is informed by your own experience.
Correct.
And people you love's their
right.
experience. Yeah.
And did you mention Temple Recommends in your role there?
Oh, yeah. I haven't mentioned it, but yeah, it's a
You
big
want to
part
tell
of it.
people what that's about?
Yeah, 15 questions.
So somebody wants to go to the temple, get married, do baptisms for the dead. Basically, the Mormon temple is where the most sacred ordinances are held, including the personal endowment, the washings and anointings, the endowment, and then the temple marriage. But in order to be able to go to the temple first,
You have to be interviewed
by
a bishop or a member of the bishopric.
And
And then Stake Presidency. So it's a double interview.
Yeah.
You have to do it twice, as if the first guys didn't quite get it right.
So there's a bunch of questions.
15 questions. Yeah.
Things like,
Do you have faith in and a testimony of God, the Eternal Father, His Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost? I can list them all out right now if you
go
want.
ahead, list a couple of them.
All right. Do you sustain the President of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as the prophet, seer, and revelator, and as the only person on earth who is authorized to exercise all priesthood keys? Do you support or sustain any practices, teachings, or doctrine contrary to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Do you understand and obey the word of wisdom? Do you live the law of chastity? Are there any sins in your life that need to be resolved as part of your repentance process? By priesthood authority as part of your repentance process? Do you consider yourself worthy to enter the Lord's house and participate in temple ordinances? Do you wear the garment, the temple garment, as is instructed in the endowment? Oh, how does it go? Gosh.
Day and night?
No,
Or-
do you keep the covenant you made with God in the temple? No, not God. I added that. I added that because it made it more here. I made a covenant with God. Do you keep the covenants you made in the temple, including wearing the temple garment as instructed in the endowment? So in the temple recommended reviews, you're asking if they wear their underwear the way they're supposed to wear their underwear, basically.
Right.
Among other things, do you have a testimony of the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ? Do you have a testimony of the atonement of Jesus Christ and his role as your Savior and Redeemer? And it's not just the prophet. It's followed by the question with the prophet, him holding the keys to, do you sustain the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 apostles as prophets, seers, and revelators? Do you sustain all other general authorities and local leaders of the church? If you don't do any of these things, you don't get a go.
Did you mention tithing? The tithing question?
Can I tell you what I did? Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
They had to fix it.
You're
This
getting
is-
on mischievous, like a little
I was
mischief
angry.
in the eyes.
We'll start with the way the question's asked.
What's that?
How's the question asked?
Which question?
Traditionally,
The traditional,
Tithing?
Tithing.
the
Are you a
tradi-
full tithe payer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you a full tithe payer?
Yeah.
So every year you have to report tithing. And I was angry at the church.
Talk about tithing settlement and what that is.
It's tithing declaration, John.
Oh, sorry.
They changed the name.
Okay. I've been out
You're
a little
declaring
bit.
your tithing. And
What's the
don't-
purpose of tithing settlement? For
I don't
those who-
understand the purpose in today's world because it's all done online. You can go and you can look at your tithing and know that whether or not you're accurate or not. Tithing settlement back in the day is because you kept these yellow sheets of what you paid and you brought them forward and you basically had an accounting where you compared what the church records are compared to your records to make sure they lined up. That was a tithing settlement to declare whether or not you were a full tithe payer or a part tithe payer or a non-tithe payer.
And to shame you accordingly.
I was going to say, I know
Shame
why
you
you
it's
still
shame
is,
you accordingly
because if you're
because you
sitting
couldn't
in there,
Go to the temple.
Yeah.
Say it again.
I said, I know why you still, because if they're sitting in there with you and they're not, it's going to make them feel bad.
That's right.
Yeah. So
It's not just to shame them; it's to keep them. So, like, if I'm a dad, tell us if I'm exaggerating. If I'm a dad and my daughter is 21 and getting married in the temple, right? And I haven't been paying my tithing, and my daughter's about to go in the temple to get married, I got to come to you to get a temple recommend.
correct.
And if I haven't been paying my tithing, how does that play out with a normal Mormon bishop?
Either you pay a back pay to make yourself good and current, or you don't go.
A dad doesn't see his own child's wedding or mom.
Actually, I have a recent friend that couldn't go to her own son's wedding, not based on particularly tithing, but yeah, how wrong is that? Her own son's wedding.
So the bishops are the enforcer to make sure people are paying the church money, basically. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. And then explain what it's like socially if a dad isn't at his daughter's temple wedding or a mom isn't at her son's temple wedding. What is that? How is that interpreted by the surrounding family and
Well, we
board
talked about
members?
suffering, which happens, but then we talked about unnecessary suffering. That's all that is. It's just not necessary. It creates suffering that shouldn't exist,
Because those people, what is assumed about those people?
that they're not worthy.
Meaning what in the minds of members?
They're not good enough.
But they probably did what?
Sinned, committed some sin. And it might be omission or commission. It doesn't matter. It's still sin.
But they're thinking, well, either he masturbates and has
course.
a pornography problem.
Of course, people are thinking right now as they watch me on this film that there's something way off. He's sinned. He's done this great thing. And that's why he couldn't stay.
Yeah.
It couldn't be further from the truth. I couldn't do it because I saw the corruption within firsthand. And I couldn't participate in it anymore. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And we can get into that.
I think the consequence of what you're saying, too, is this idea that the ward members in that situation, because it is a culture based on conformity and control, it's like you're identified as a danger, like you're othered in that moment. You're now suspect in the community. And your family members are a little bit like pitied, like we kind of need to reach out to them and offer them more because now they have a parent that's not right.
Yeah. I was just, the shame parade we talked about with Amanda, with you not taking the sacrament.
Yeah.
Isn't it kind of exponentially worse when an adult is not allowed to go to the temple, especially for something as sacred as a temple wedding?
Yeah. Not worthy enough to enter God's house. I'm like, God's house. God would let anybody in his house to fill of his love. That's where my 9-year-old struggled because this all happened the week before she was going to go on her first temple trip.
11-year-old Alice.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, she's
okay.
11. She's not 9. Oh, yeah. So it was going to be her first temple trip. So she was a little sad about that. So we talked about it. And I told her, I was like, that's what makes me so sad, though. They say you have to wait until you're 12 to enter the house of God. Or in my opinion, she's 100 times more worthy to enter than I even am. But instead we put this sight in their mind so that they have to work towards that, so that they have to be worthy enough. That's already setting in their mind that their worth is not great enough, that they have to make their worth. They have to grow themselves to be worthy. Oh, it's just so many things.
Yeah. So, the bishop really is, sometimes there are people that get annoyed. Why are you so focused on Mormon Stories? Why is it so important for you to have a regular rotation of ex-Mormon bishops on Mormon Stories, or ex-Stake presidents, or ex-Relief Society presidents? All I can say is it's because the church is a patriarchy run on power and authority. And so power and authority matters. And so if a bishop chooses to leave the church or even question the church, members are going to pay attention to that. And that's partly why
we're sitting here.
And why your TikTok exploded. It's because members are like, what? A bishop can't lose their faith, let alone resign. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, 5 bishops have reached out to me and 2 stake presidents. We've been
Wait,
talking.
actively sitting bishops? So you've spoken with 5 actively serving bishops and 2 actively serving stake presidents?
Yes.
Wow.
They told me that I gave them the courage to do what they feel that they couldn't do. Now, whether or not they are actually going to do it or not, I don't know. I don't care. But they have my support either way.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so those are, I think we covered the main functions of
A bishop.
being a bishop.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe talk about the parts you loved and the parts you hated, and for the parts you hated, why you hated them, if you want.
Parts I loved. Well, there's a part that I think is somewhat the ego climbing out and saying, hey, look at me. People are turning to me for advice. And that's okay, but I didn't feed that very much. I'll tell you what triggered me at the very beginning. I had a young man who was preparing for a mission. He had a problem with pornography and masturbation. And I didn't know how to handle it because there was no training, right, John? No training.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? So I called the stake president. I said, hey, I've got this thing going on. How do I handle it? Well, in his defense, he never served as a bishop. He just served as a counselor in the stake presidency and then served as the stake president. But his 2 counselors both served as bishops. And he says their answer for pornography and masturbation is 4 weeks. And I said, okay. So I sat him down. I said, 4 weeks, no sacrament. And then I got to thinking about it. I was like, doesn't that sound a little Catholic? Like, a few Hail Marys and you're back? It didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel like it was going to fix the problem. And I'd actually asked the young man, what, has this happened before? Well, sure. So obviously these little 4-week intervals of no sacrament is not helping the problem. So I started listening to a therapist. She has a podcast, Sarah Brewer. I forget what it's called now. I can't think of it. But she teaches how to conquer the triggers and the anxiety that is brought on by pornography and masturbation. And it helped me help him to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with you. And here's the thing. Instead of not taking the sacrament, I changed it up. Take the sacrament. Bless the sacrament. Go to the temple. Do those things to help draw you closer to God so that you can overcome this thing. Now, given I see it completely differently now, but then 2.5 years ago, that's how I saw it. But things changed. I had a young woman come to me. This is going to be hard for me to tell. Can I have some of those tissues? Mm-hmm. Young woman came to me. She was bawling. She said, I had sex. And she just felt so rotten. I was sitting there just crying with her where she cried because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to answer anything. But then she asked, don't you need to know the details? And given I've been a bishop for maybe 2 months, I said, absolutely not. I don't want to know the details. I want to know 2 things. 1, were you raped? And 2, is there a possibility that you're pregnant? Because if so, we need to talk to your mom and dad. That's it. And that's how I handled every single one of those cases after that. And she asked me, well, what about the sacrament? And I damn sure wasn't going to say 4 weeks. I said, I don't know. I'm new at this. What do you think? And she says, I don't think I should take it. I said, okay, let's go with that then. What was so amazing was like maybe 6-7 weeks later, she came, she's like, Bishop, I really want to take the sacrament now. I said, okay, then you should. I don't need to be her source of forgiveness or validation that she's been forgiven. That's what I learned as a bishop early on. I didn't abuse that power. I didn't ever participate in the voyeuristic filth that so many have. And they'll act like they didn't. But if they ask those questions, then they participated in it. 100%. Because nowhere in the handbook does it tell you to ask those questions. They've been taught to do that. Standing in high councils. And it's wrong.
So let's just say someone in our family very close to us was asked by our bishop if they masturbated as an 18-year-old. Where does the bishop get the idea or the instruction to do that? Is that in the bishop's manual?
There is nothing. I've had the same question asked to me, and a friend, Jason Harris, a friend of mine who's stepped away from the church as well, has said the same thing. The Stake Presidency member in his temple recommendation review asked specifically, do you have a problem with pornography and masturbation? John, I listed off, 11 of the 15 questions a minute ago?
Temple recommend questions?
None of them ask that.
Right.
That is someone asking out of their own whatever's going on. And in my opinion, that's where I started digging. Well, what are they hiding?
But here's the thing. Like, I was a therapist for 6 years at Utah State University, tons of USU students coming in. Tons of Mormon bishops are asking that question regularly. So I don't think it's adequate to just say each bishop or stake president individually comes up with that. It's too systemic.
Yeah.
So do you have any idea where that comes from beyond each individual person's own Because number one, the church could stop that, right? It could just add to the handbook of instructions, never ask anyone this, but they haven't as of 2024. And then on the flip side of that, it's got to be, is it training, verbal training that maybe bishops get in stake training meetings?
No, I've got to tell you, it doesn't come from training. It doesn't. It comes from...
Tradition?
No, I think it comes from weak men who have a weakness and they don't know how to control it. And they get off on that stuff. I know that sounds weird, but people do. It's a very real thing. Voyeurism's a very real thing. There's something even titillating about it that men can enjoy. I just can tell you it's nowhere in the handbook. It's not taught. It's not trained. But yet it is everywhere. I think it's talked about. I know high councils ask details in their big, huge councils of affairs and, adulterous things. They ask those questions because I know people personally who've sat on those as either the victim or the one being held in counsel. To me, those questions have nothing to do with the sin. Nothing. It only tears the man and the woman down even more and then reprograms them to pledge allegiance to the machine.
So your theory is, okay, first of all, I'm guessing that a decent percentage of Mormon bishops and stake presidents masturbate themselves. Is that
John,
can you?
They're going to hate me for this, and that's fine. But I want to be real and raw. Absolutely. And I'd tell her, hey, I did this thing today, just so you know. Yeah. And there's some that don't. And then there are the ones that are like, oh, I would never. And they're, that's fine. But if I'm going to completely be raw and honest here and let my vulnerability completely shine, 100%. Now, was it every week or every month? No, heck no. It was rare. But nonetheless, it happened.
And that's got to be weird as a Mormon bishop or stake president, knowing that you're policing the chastity of all the members of your ward.
Can I tell you, it's
but you're doing the things that you're policing, right?
This is ironic. The only time in my life I didn't feel guilty for it was when I was a bishop.
Well, explain that.
I don't know. I can't. I won't ever know.
Well, I wonder if there's a protective, like when you're chosen to lead in that level of position, if there's a sense of like you're feeling good. So you have a little more leeway.
I mean,
know.
God called you, right? So, I mean, there's that.
When young men would come to me with this problem, I would say, it's okay. I'm there too. We're all learning.
Said no other bishop ever.
We're all learning. We're all trying to figure out who we are and what we're doing here. And I've got to tell you, like I said, Christianity institutionalized guilt as a virtue. 100%. And they use that, and it's perpetual, and they rubber band. I had one young man who would come to me, and I could just see it. I say, hey, man, it's okay. Not a big deal. Here's what I need from you next week. I need you on the stand blessing the sacrament. No matter what happens this week, that's what's happening next week. Promise me you'll stand. You'll do it. Without shame. Without guilt. And he would, but he'd do it. You could see he was fighting. Because he'd go home and mom and dad would tell him no. And he's torn. And I might have been the bad guy for that, the villain, because I was tearing him between two different things. But I've told my sons, my daughters, that you're not allowed to feel guilty anymore. Not just shame. Because I think that we've separated those two words, guilt and shame, to mean different things. And I don't believe that they are. I believe they're the same thing. And we need to remove the guilt. If we want to conquer this thing, we need to remove the guilt from it. And people will learn to master themselves on their own without ecclesiastical intervention.
And what I'm trying to thread the needle here in is acknowledging how exceptional of a bishop you were in so many of these areas, even before you lost your faith fully, but not wanting to give the false impression that this is the normal response that a Mormon bishop would give. Because in my experience, the Mormon bishop would tell them not to take the sacrament, not let them go get a temple recommend to do baptisms for the dead, potentially keep you from your mission, and everybody's wondering why you're not going on a mission or why your mission's been delayed. And this can be either masturbation or any sort of sexual experimentation, all the way up to delaying someone's temple wedding. And then if the transgression starts to get into actual intercourse, it can be excommunication from the church, if not, disfellowshipment, if not excommunication. And that's not even mentioning all the guilt and shame. So I love that you're giving a model for a compassionate, healthy bishop. But I think if we were to poll how many Mormons were told by their bishop that not only was masturbation okay, but that the bishops did it too, I think it would be less than 99.9% of people's experiences. And the shame parade would be the norm.
John, as I sit here now, I feel shame and guilt. And I'm okay. I'll take that hit so others can see that they're okay too. But it doesn't feel good to say that. It's embarrassing. It sucks. But you know what? If it helps people feel less of the shame and guilt that is so perpetual in this thing called Mormonism, then I'll be glad to do it.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So, other things you loved about being a bishop before we get to the things that...
The youth. The youth. We had so much fun. We laughed. We cried. We had spiritual experiences. We had fun.
Aren't bishops told that the youth is their most important responsibility?
It is now. Yes, sir. Yes, 100%. And rightly so. But I've got to tell you, I think that in and of itself is partially why I couldn't go much further. It's so the bishops are not just bishops now. They're the bishops and they're the young men's presence. And let's just say it, they're the young women's presence as well. They're handling all of that, plus wearing the hat of, the other duties of a bishop. And I wish the church would go back to calling young men's presidents to give them a little bit less of a heavy burden to carry.
Do you have a sense why the church made that change? So there used to be a young men's president, and now there's no longer a young men's president?
Correct.
Interesting.
Any idea why they would add more responsibility to a bishop?
Yeah, I know why.
Why?
They're losing their flock.
Okay.
If the youth can connect with their bishop, then the youth can stay centered in the gospel. If they feel like they can trust me and come to me for anything, well, then I'm going to help keep them grounded.
It builds their personal relationship
100%.
with you.
That's right. So then it continues to perpetuate them staying. Yeah, 100%.
So are you saying that the church is determined that if youth have a more personal connection with their bishop, that they believe that those youth are more likely to remain faithful in the church?
100%. The reason I was faithful, I had a great bishop. I'd love to say his name, but I won't. He's a great bishop. He took me golfing. He did things with me. He cared about me. I look back at that, and a lot of the reasons I stayed and did the things I did was because of the example that he was. Absolutely.
Okay. But then that adds just so much more
Sure.
responsibility, stress, responsibility, pressure. But you're saying that was your favorite part.
It was, hands down. It was my favorite part because when people would come to me, they always left feeling like they were enough. Every time. I never left them saying, ooh, you did this bad thing and we're going to have to pay for it. Never. I let them know that they were loved. I actually listened to the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm not here to stroke my own ego or to tell on myself, but this is how things were done. We had a membership council for a woman who had an affair. And when it came down to it, I'd never had one yet at that time. And I didn't have another one since. And the reason being is because of that one experience. All the other issues I had, I kept them private because I knew the damage that it does. So I didn't put them out there to be made known by anyone other than me. I hid things from the stake. I hid things from my bishopric members because I knew that the shame that those people would feel was going to be way worse than the result that would come after a membership council. But the very first one, she's a close friend of ours. The thought of her having to sit in a room with 4 men and judge her made me completely uneasy. So I called the stake president and I asked if it was okay if she had an advocate of her choosing to sit in and to hold her hand and to be there for her, to support her. And at first he was like, why? She's done this thing. And I can't remember exactly how I painted the picture, but I imagine my wife sitting in front of 4 men, all alone. It's not going to happen. So he said it was okay to have an advocate. And I hope this doesn't get him in trouble because it shouldn't. It should be something that should happen across the board in the church. They need a voice, someone to hold their hand, someone to be there for them. And she so happened to choose my wife, Amanda, to sit in on a membership council. I was heckled for the decision we made, but most people should have said she should have been informally disciplined. The terms now have changed. Formal, informal, and then excommunication. We didn't ever participate in any of that. We said, go. Live your life. You're good enough. You made a mistake. So have I. Let's move on. Where I draw the line is with pedophilia. 100%. The church should not even be touching that. Period.
What do you mean?
Okay, I'll give you an example. There's a man in our stake who is a former Stake Presidency member. For 8 years while he was in the Stake Presidency, he was molesting 2 of his daughters. 1 of his daughters for sure. The other started to happen, and the oldest daughter intervened. Somehow it was reported, but this man was a lawyer. He was smart, never served a day in prison.
These stories.
I have seen him in recent months at a stake youth dance on 2 different occasions. He's not supposed to be around kids. The church gave him an umbrella, a shelter, where someone who can rape his daughters can be forgiven, serve no prison time, and be let back into society. The church should not have a say in any of these matters, period. These men should be marked men. You should tattoo their foreheads. And I'll tell you, in Mississippi, the prison there, they mark them in prison. It's a known thing, so they know who they are. They put an X on their face. It's brutal. And I'm not saying we do that, but we should tattoo their foreheads. Tell who they are. And we should not ever let them back into the church, period. We say don't do the temple work for Adolf Hitler, right? Joseph Fielding Smith, Doctrines of Salvation, right? It's all in there. So we don't do temple work for him, but yet we allow pedophiles back in to perpetuate the harm that they've done. Or to even just lay it out there, whether they do or don't. It's still a risk. It's still a fear. It's always on everyone's mind. Will they do it again? Are they doing it now? We don't know. We should not be participating in that.
We've covered this on the podcast, but can you explain historically a second counselor in a stake presidency, a bishop, a stake president, is caught molesting a teen or a child? How does the Mormon Church traditionally handle that? Can you
They
tell
have a
our
membership
viewers?
council. They handle it with a membership council of 15 men. Now it's just the stake presidency. They don't even do it with the council anymore. High council doesn't even have a council anymore, which I I don't even want to have an opinion on that, but they believe in Mormonism that you can be forgiven for anything except what? Denial of the Holy Ghost? Even murder you can be forgiven of. Well, they claim that these men can be forgiven and changed. They can't be changed, John. It's an illness.
And what I want you to speak to is to what extent can the church hide, predators in their own midst to keep other members of the ward and stake from knowing there's a predator in their midst? Does the church let everybody know?
I don't know that for certain. I can't say yes or no. All I can tell you is people know about it, and they act as if that was forgiven and it's in the past.
So in your case, it was public enough to where people found out.
Oh, it's public.
Because
Anybody can search it. It's
but
all
did he
documented.
get caught? Did he?
Yeah, he got caught for gratification of lust. He ended up just saying all he did was touch his daughter's vagina.
Yeah.
8 years, that's all he did? Give me a break. We know more. There's more that happened. You can talk to the daughter. I bet she'd come on your show. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and I guess I'm getting to the idea that Mormon bishops and stake presidents call the Curtin McConkie hotline, and they're told not to report to the police. What?
I have a story firsthand.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, remember in
I'm
my
trying
ward.
to get to the idea of how the church.
Well, let me give you this then.
Okay, yeah.
Remember in my ward, I caught him at a Halloween party with his phone like this, and his camera was out, and he was videoing young girls. I walked up to the man. Can I say the F word in here? I won't use the F word. I used it though. I walked up to him. I said, "Take another picture, and I will effing end you right now." Then I met with him, and I investigated a little more. I came to find out that he abused his siblings growing up, and his father was the bishop at the time he was doing it. Got swept under the rug. Then I reached out to his ex-wife and his daughter, and I have an email, and I'll let you read it, of the terrible things that he did to her while she was a child. This is a man who lived in my ward, who not only lived in my ward, he lived with his mom and his sister had 3 children. I called the law firm. I spoke with, can I say his name?
You called Curtin McConkie.
I did.
Yeah.
Can I say the lawyer's name?
Sure.
Daniel McConkie. I have his number.
And why'd you call the hotline?
Because I had evidence from an email that this man was a pedophile.
And he was in your...
He's in my ward.
Yeah. And you weren't warned beforehand that a member of your ward had a history.
No.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
I put all of it together. And I would interview those kids like hard. And they would just cry. They would never tell on him. And I don't know whether or not even to this day, whether anything happened. But the McConkie law firm, Kirk and McConkie law firm, Curtin McConkie law firm told me to stand down. That if I didn't have a specific youth in my ward who claimed that they were being abused by this man, I had no grounds to report anything. I had told him I have an email with all this information. He has a history of abuse that we are certain of because I've heard it from the siblings of the family. And I was told to stand down. So I reported it to the police anyway.
When you say stand down, what did they want you not to do?
Not to make a stink, not to make noise, not to approach it, not to confront him.
Just leave it alone.
Leave it alone.
And let the predator continue to be in the midst of the ward and stake.
Yeah. Whether he was acting on it or not, I could never prove.
What about reporting it to the police?
I did that.
Did they want you to do that?
I didn't ask.
Right. Historically, they don't want you to report it to the police.
I can't attest to that in my experience, but you have probably more experience with that than I do.
Yeah. So you went ahead and defied the church's law firm, Curtin McConkie.
No, they didn't tell me not to. I just reported to the police. They told me not to approach him, but I didn't know what else to do. So I told the stake president, "What can we do?" He's like, "I don't know." So we put an annotation on his name to where he'll be triggered any other ward he goes into. We did everything we could to stop it from happening more. But
Yeah.
the stake president, as good as he is, he's like, man, I don't know what else we can do. We both had problems with it. It's disgusting. But you're limited. You're protected, or they're protected. You're not.
Right.
We should not be giving these people an umbrella to continue to perpetuate what I consider to be the greatest sin you can perform, is to take advantage of innocence. You can't fix that. And people say the atonement fixes that. No, I know the atonement. I'm damaged goods because of what happened to me. And this was the beginning of the end for me. Starting to see these things, it made me start questioning everything else. It was that membership council that set me down this path of, boy, this is a lot harder than I thought it was. Maybe I'm not cut out for it. Maybe I'm not tough enough. And it eventually led me to standing at the pulpit and resigning.
Maybe before we jump there, do you want to talk about the evolution of your faith in terms of the church's truth claims, maybe going back a little bit, and how that might have impacted you along the way as well?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Good luck finding them, but the gospel topic essays, they're on the church website. They're in your LDS library. They're extremely poorly done, in my opinion. As much money as the church has and as many brains as they have working for them, I figured they would have come up with a little better explanation to the anachronisms that they are claiming. I would say start there. Isn't it 13 questions or essays? 13?
There's a bunch.
I think it's 13, and maybe they've added since I've read them, because that was about 2 years ago that I
So
went through.
prior to being called as bishop, how aware were you of the historical problems with the church and of the truth claims?
I read Fawn Brody. I read Bushman. I read all the Givens books, Crucible of Doubt, to help bring myself back out of this thing. The Thomas McConkie books. There are so many. You've had them on your show. Patrick Mason, Planted. I thought those were all so well done. And I clung to those answers that they gave because I saw these men as complete giants intellectually. But then...
So before becoming bishop...
Before bishop.
You were already sort of a progressive
I've been
Mormon.
an avid reader, guys, for years. Okay. I've read all the church books. Not all, but a lot. But all these things as a bishop seeing, it took me back to, that doesn't add up. And that doesn't add up. And then I finally found out that 2 + 2 does not equal pizza. And that's what Mormonism is trying to say. 2 + 2 equals pizza. It doesn't even make sense.
So let's take 5 of your biggest issues, historical truth claims, because there's going to be a lot of people that this is the first and only Mormon Stories episode they've ever watched. They don't know the names Bushman or Givens or Mason. They have no idea what the CES letter is. Never heard of the Gospel Topics essay. So pick the 5 biggest historical or truth claims issues that you started to confront as a Mormon bishop.
My biggest was polygamy.
I've
always had a problem with polygamy. I love my wife. I don't want to share her. And number 1, she doesn't want to share me. And for her sake, I always had a major, major issue with polygamy.
And for those who are not Mormon, explain what that has to do with Mormonism.
Well, those who are not Mormon, I recommend you go to the Doctrine and Covenants and read section 132. That's what you should do.
And it says what?
That in the next life, Mormon men who are worthy will be given multiple wives, and their duty in heaven is to have posterity for God through the eternities.
With like a
those women.
celestial harem, basically.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We believe that garbage.
And that's still on the books, Mormon scripture?
100%.
And then did you study Joseph Smith's practice of that?
Yes.
And can you
Yes.
summarize what you
I battled it. I went back and forth. I listened to Rob Fotheringham. I went into all these recent things that have come out about Joseph not practicing polygamy, that was a Brigham thing that started, Brigham Young. And I actually have learned that narrative came from Emma when she left the church. There's too much out there. Joseph practiced polygamy without question. He married young girls. And people say he had no children. I don't believe that that's the case. I know that there are grounds to, argument there. But there's also plenty of ways of having some form of contraceptive in the 1800s. People act as if it didn't exist. I'm sorry, but it did. But Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, yes. And this is hard for me because recently I've had to contend with Joseph in my deconstruction. And I revered him as if he was God, truly. That no man had ever lived the life Joseph Smith lived.
Praise
Except
to
Jesus.
the man, right?
Yeah, praise to the man, sure. Yeah. So polygamy was a huge hang-up. And then it was historicity of the origin of the Book of Mormon. Doesn't add up.
How so?
No, they're Asians. They come from Asian descent.
Who?
The Native American Indians.
And the Book of Mormon
DNA
claims.
proves it. The Book of Mormon claims that they came from Jerusalem and that they were white. And as they became more wicked, their skin darkened. So Mormonism teaches racism as well. And I have black friends that I love. And I had biases, even while I was friends with them, because of my Mormon upbringing. And it doesn't. Mormonism is subtle when it comes to racism. They don't out it. They actually fight against it, but they're subtly actually pushing that underneath all of that in their scriptures. So those were triggers. The first vision is what really, I would say, what broke my shelf.
Talk us through that.
Joseph Smith.
What were you taught, and then what'd you learn?
In 1820, a young farm boy had a question. Which church was true? Read James 1:5, right? We all did this on the mission. That says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God that upbraideth not, or that upbraideth
Who
not, shall be given
not,
him.
who upbraideth not, and shall
Yeah.
give it to all men liberally. Yeah.
Give it to all men liberally, and upbraideth not,
Yeah.
and it shall be given him.
Yeah.
So we believe that Joseph went into a grove of trees, prayed, and had a vision where he saw God, the Father, and his Son, Jesus Christ, speak to him, tell him that none of the churches were true and that he needed to form the only true church on the earth. The problem with that is it didn't happen in 1820. It couldn't have. It doesn't add up. With the story of what he was telling, it had to have been at least 1823, at least, if it even happened then. But the first we ever hear of it is 1832, after the church has been organized. And tell me if I'm wrong on these dates, but I'm
That's
pretty
all
sure I'm
sounding
accurate.
good to me. Yeah.
Yeah. 1832. And I think, personally, people were on to Joseph. They're figuring out that he was somewhat of a scam artist. And he's like, no, you guys got to understand, I saw God. He spoke to me. And in the 1832 account, he said he saw one personage.
The Lord, he says.
The Lord.
Yeah.
It was a Trinitarian view of the Godhead.
Yeah.
And it isn't until 1838, which is quite convenient because it was 15 days after Oliver Cowdery was excommunicated and kicked out of the church and left, that Joseph tells.
For rightly accusing
rightly
Joseph Smith
of an
of
affair.
an affair.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once Oliver's out of the picture, the three witnesses are out. So now he can create his own narrative that fits what his father believed in a Godhead that Mormonism believes in. Two gods. God the Father, God the Son, and then God the Holy Ghost, as Bruce McConkie would say. Doesn't add up.
So he
It's-
changes the story in the
Changes-
1838 version
Correct.
to go from the Lord to what?
To the Mormon Godhead of two personages instead of one.
That's a pretty big change.
Yeah.
It basically doubles the deity.
It doubles the deity. Doesn't add up.
Yeah.
With everything else that is tied to him, it just couldn't make sense any longer to me, and I couldn't participate in it. Not and sit as a bishop and justifiably do what a bishop has to do to help other people. So I had to step down.
Okay, so these doubts you're having about Mormon theology, Mormon scripture, how many months or years before you stepping down were you starting?
Yeah.
Because the idea of a bishop losing his faith is kind of mind-blowing. A Mormon would think, putting my Mormon brain on, like the bishop talks to God, he's faithful, represents God to the ward. He's going to be the most righteous and spiritual man. He's going to be the least likely person in the ward to be having a faith crisis and losing his faith.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not true.
But you have to understand, a decade ago I read those other books, and then I read the other books that contend with those other books, the apologetics, and their reasons for continuing the faith. And that worked for me. Mm-hmm. And then as a bishop, you started to see these things happen firsthand that just were wrong. And when you see that, you're like, oh, what else is wrong with this thing? So you go back to that thing. And that's what I did probably 7 months ago.
Got it.
And then it was anxiety every day going to church. I was angry. And the ward members know, ward council, like I'd get mad, I'd get angry. I'd say things about the current leadership of the church because I knew that they know this narrative, and they continue to let people believe differently. But they know. They know.
You're saying they know the problems with the church's history and its truth claims.
Joseph Fielding Smith tore out the 1832 account of the first vision. He tore it out. Wasn't it the Tanners who found it and recognized that there were pages torn out?
Yeah.
So that the 1838 edition would be the only edition. How is that okay?
Yeah.
And you think the current leadership has no clue? No. I'm sorry, but no. I'm not. I'm dumb, but I'm not that dumb.
Yeah. And so as you are losing your faith as a bishop, there's the irony there that everybody's faith, so many people's faith in the ward is leaning on your faith, and you're representing the church as a faithful member who's upholding the truthfulness of the church. And my understanding is that's a pressure cooker that eats away at your soul, knowing that in some ways you might feel like you're falsely representing how you really feel, and propping up a church that you're starting to feel is doing a lot of harm. Can you talk about that dilemma?
Well, I think what we're talking about is enmeshment, right? People's testimonies of the truth is partially in me as a bishop. Like part of the reason they're coming is because they've got a really good bishop who stands up and he does these things that make me really feel good about who I am. And I go home feeling like I was filled that day. And guys, I was good at that. I was. But that's why people are so angry at me right now, because of the enmeshment of what part of me that was then part of them is now no longer.
Yeah.
And they have no idea how to contend with that. And I'm going to just tell you now, neither do I. I'm hurting just as much. It's just as painful for me. But that's really the root of it. We're enmeshed together in this thing. We're clinging to each other because really the narrative just doesn't add up. So the people do. Yeah. So cling to the people. And that's the thing I'm doing right now. I'm clinging to still. And I know there's this ex-Mormon group and this Mormon group, and they're fighting. I wish they'd freaking stop. Because they're only harming themselves. The answer is love. And I don't even know if it's love. I think it's finding beauty in the individual. No matter what they choose to do. Even those people who are pedophiles, there's a place for love for them somewhere. I can't find it personally. But in time, maybe that's what heals them. I don't know the perfect order, but I know that we have to quit giving them a platform to repeat what they're doing. and be called good men. You know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, there's no such thing as good or bad men. There's only cowards and non-cowards, and cowards are capable of doing the vilest of things. I believe those men are cowards, and they need to learn to be men or women.
So if you can address what it's like to stop believing but still be serving as a bishop and what that does to your mental health.
It's not good. Look at me. I've had suicidal thoughts. I
As a
don't know if I should
bishop?
say that.
As a bishop?
Sure, absolutely. And after, even more so. I tell my wife and kids about it. Why? Because if I keep that, it just builds up. And it's not because I want to end my life. It's because I want to turn the power off just for a minute. Just turn it off. You know, I told one of my good friends, I said, man, the day I resigned was the first night I went to bed and I put my phone on silent.
Wow.
Every bishop goes to bed every night and they check their phone and make sure it's not on silent because they don't know who's going to call or when they're going to have to go put on their suit and go to somebody's house at 1 a.m.
Did you do that?
Sure I did. Absolutely. I can remember going like 4 days without seeing my kids because it was one thing after another, after another, after another. Sure I did. And I did it because I loved the people, the same people that hate me right now.
What types of things were you helping ward members with?
Marital issues, mostly. People fight. It's unbelievable, the arguments you have in a bishop's office. You just sit there and watch them yell at each other. And they want you to help them. I don't know how to help that. I'll listen. And usually that's typically what helps. Just knowing that they can work it out.
So domestic disputes is a big part of being a bishop.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of the late night, a lot of fighting kind of at night.
And all of a sudden, some construction worker is the answer. Have him come over in his suit and give a blessing. Can I tell you about blessings real quick?
Yeah.
I had a sick daughter a few weeks ago. I went upstairs and I gave her a blessing. I didn't use priesthood power. I just blessed her with love. Her fever broke. There's power in us, period. They are trying to take it from you and tell you that they gave it to you. And they're trying to give it a name. It's in all of us. And you don't need a title, and you don't need to have somebody tell you that you can and cannot do that. And we're getting off into the weeds, aren't we?
No, this is the meat. Thank you. Okay. So Amanda, as Nick is serving and becoming more and more troubled by the worthiness stuff, the disciplinary stuff, and then as he's starting to have his own doubts and questions about the truthfulness of the church, did you know any of this? Did he share it with you? Could you see that something was wrong?
He would
Tell
share
us how
what
this
he
has been for
could.
you. What's that?
He would share what he could, but of course he couldn't share like details or anything. And yes, I started seeing like a major change just because in my opinion, it's not something that anybody should be able to take on. Like I told him, I'm like, you're sitting across the desk from these people and they're literally like pouring their negative energy into your body. And you're like this sponge that's just soaking it up.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, like you're gonna burst. That's what I told him. I was like, if anything, the church should have like a counselor specifically for that.
Absolutely.
Where the bishops can go and just pour their hearts out. Because it's what broke both of us, you know?
Absolutely.
It's so much and it's just so heavy. And you could see it as time went on, definitely more and more. And then as we got closer to just him being done, it was so hard. just such an emotional roller coaster. And going back and forth of feeling like this is what we need to do, or actually the night before.
What were the choices in terms of what you thought you might need to do, but then why that was?
We just kept going back and forth. Do we just tough it out? Do we just tough it out for the next 3.5 years and then, then be done? Because of almost trying to do good on the inside. Like, how much good can we maybe do in this position on the inside?
Right. Very common.
But it just was too much
Yeah.
the
But
night before.
if it's okay, there's also this idea that everyone expects a Mormon bishop to serve 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like he said about his predecessor, if he asks to be released at 2 years or 3 years, what happens in the ward?
Everybody just assumes that something went wrong.
Like what? What would come into people's minds?
Affair or sin of some sort.
We're back
is
at
really
the
only
temple
thing.
scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Same list, yeah.
Some kind of, which is why he wanted to address the ward the way he did, because he wanted the people that we literally love to know, like, it's not something that we did on our part wrong. It's just not okay. It's not okay to be put through this. And even the night before he stepped down, he was so anxious for so many weeks, but he turned to me and he was like, we just won't do it. I'll just tough it out. It's fine. We'll be okay. And I was like, no, like, you're already starting to see bits of peace and like bits of happiness in him I had not seen before. I'm like, there's no way. No, you're not going to do that to yourself or to our family, really,
Go ahead, Mark.
I was hoping, I'm sorry, I'm going to make you go backwards. I was
okay.
hoping to ask this before moving in, but your piece of the puzzle with if you had your own kind of faith journey as he's having his, and if there were points of connecting or like, do you know what I mean? Like your own personal journey.
Yeah. I feel like for me, what I clung to was just like the modern day church and the modern day, like the temple and eternal families. My testimony was a lot more just basic and simple, and it started falling apart in 2020 with just the way they addressed COVID and a lot of those things. So I just started being very skeptical since then, and just feeling like I could voice more of my opinion of how I felt. Trying to train thoughts, but yeah, just little things aligned. Like for me, it was not church history the way it's Nick's. I just wasn't one to ever even dive into it. He even told me that recently. He's like, but you need to know all this. I'm like, no, I don't. I didn't have a firm testimony of the prophet Joseph Smith to start with. Why do I need it now? Especially in a phase that I'm going through right now. But then it's like when your eyes are open to something, you can just see everything. Like I started seeing how just everything was wrong. Well, okay, so my belief in eternal families. Do I really believe that God is going to separate us as a family in heaven? No. They're my family and my children. And if so, then that's not a God that I want to believe in anyway.
Yeah.
I kind of mentioned the leadership of the church. I don't believe that anymore. I don't believe that one person speaks for God. I believe that we all can reach God and all be prompted and feel the spirit of him within ourselves. It doesn't come from a man.
Yeah.
Of all people, a man. Like, it blows my mind that I believed all these things, and now they're just laid out in front of me like black and white.
Keep going. I want to hear more. This is great.
I'm trying to think of any other ones.
It's like concept of God, really. You having some, and then I'm hearing authority.
Yeah.
Right. No longer believing one man can speak
Holds
for
authority. Yeah.
How about one true church?
No.
What's wrong with that?
For me, like now where I'm at now, I kind of just don't believe in any organized religion. I don't believe in anybody holding power to speak for God for a group of people, which goes back to me just feeling like I want to be connected in a different way. I want to be connected to my life and my family and my time and nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I address this real quick, this particular thing? Because I might make people mad, but Theo Vaughn and Jordan Peterson did this great interview on Theo Vaughn's show where they talk about the children of Israel being captive slaves and then being freed. But the reason they wandered in a desert that only takes 3 days to cross for 40 years was because they were given every viable option rather than the slavery from whence they came. And some people say, well, it'd be better to be a slave than to have every option. And the reality is no, it's not. And you don't have to be lost and wander for 40 years. There's answers for these things, but you have to step away, step out of the painting to see it for what it is first. And what you'll find is you're wading in 3 feet of water and you thought you had drowned in 3 feet. And all you really have to do is put your feet down. And Friedrich Nietzsche said it. He said, those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. We haven't lost our minds. We're just dancing because we're enjoying the music.
Yeah.
And we're not sinning. We're not partying. We're not doing things that are bad.
Which is one thing I've loved. Like, a bunch of my friends who are not members have been reaching out to me since seeing all this. And a lot of them have said, like, that's the one crazy thing that we thought of you. Like, how could you believe all of these things? And I'm like, well, when you're born and raised in it, and that's literally all you learn from the minute you're born, what else do you believe? Until you have the knowledge to step away and see it for what it is.
Yeah.
But it's actually helped me a ton, because I'm, you go through the phases of thinking, I'm crazy. No, I'm not crazy. It's like, oh, okay, other people see this. I wish you had told me that a long time ago.
Right. It's kind of in your own time.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. You got to see it for
So
yourself.
did you two have each other amidst your I'm trying to kind of
Yes and
figure out
no.
if you did it together or if it was separate, different timing, or...
Yes and no.
What do you mean by no?
Well, Nick had a lot of questions, and I guess it went back to like church history stuff that I don't really did not have as strong of a testimony in anyway. I was like, no, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet.
So he would try and talk to you about his problems with the
Yeah.
church history.
And
you
some would line up, but some I'm like, oh, I don't even know. I'll have to figure that out on my own.
But you didn't want to hear it necessarily.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
It was bad. Like,
It's been nonstop for
it's nonstop for me.
probably
I'm
like 8 or 9
a
months.
very go. I'm up 4:30
said,
most
turn it
mornings
off.
going. I can't turn it off.
His brain does not turn off,
So
You're
you're saying it's been a
rabbit holing.
hot flame for 8 or 9 months for you?
at least.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So have you been in a bit of a rabbit hole deconstruction? Just sort of, yeah.
Every day, all day.
Yeah.
And for me,
That's all
I'll
I
even
do.
tell him, I'm like, put it away, because I'm good at that. I'm like,
Yeah.
put it away and do something else. Like, I'll put it away. I'll go outside. I'll connect with music. I'll connect with the kids. But it's like,
Yeah.
no, I got to just tunnel through and
Yeah, I want to rip the
beat
Band-Aid
this.
off kind of person.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just as someone who spent 45 years as a Mormon, and I'm thinking about how I look at the bishop every Sunday when I show up. He's presiding, he's getting up, he's calling people, sustaining people, he's leading the ward. I can't imagine what it would be like for that bishop to be in a full-blown
Yeah.
faith crisis for 8 or 9 months in the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And yet every
so
Sunday he's
much.
showing up as if everything's great.
It's so hard. Sometimes you could see that it definitely was not great. Like, he would be.
Sounds like he was angry in
He was
some of the
angry,
meetings.
yeah.
Like
What do you-
and you're doing all that and still holding all the ward members'
Yeah.
pain
Yeah.
as your pain is increasing.
Gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Nick, it seems like you're feeling something.
No, it's just hard to reflect on. I've always tried to do the right thing. I just don't know why the right thing's always the hard thing. That's all. It's always so hard. I'm not a perfect man by any means, right? Bishop who masturbates. Oh, he's definitely not perfect. But that's the reality of it. I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with that.
But were you reflecting on the difficulty of the past 9 months?
It was, what's the phrase they say? I couldn't sacrifice my peace for their presence anymore.
You had to save yourself.
It was week after week. I was dying. I was dying to show up because I always delivered. And now I have to deliver without using prophets' names or even scriptures.
So you started self-editing it to the
I
congregation.
started using stories that don't have anything to do with Christianity to touch people's hearts because it worked for me.
Yeah.
So how did your language change as bishop over those 9 months?
I don't even know, except I stopped testifying of anything other than Christ. And given, when I was called bishop, people said, "What's the theme, bishop? What's the theme?" Or they would
Yeah.
say, "What is the subject of the talk that I'm supposed to give every month?"
Right.
I stood up maybe, my second week, and I said, "Brothers and sisters, don't ask me that question ever again. The answer is always Christ. Period. We preach of Christ. We prophesy of Christ, right? We do all of these things so that our children will know who they can turn to for a remission of their sins. And it's not a bishop or a stake president. It's Christ." That's how I started. And the members followed, man. They loved it.
It changed the whole.
It changed the whole dynamic
Feel.
of the word.
I can imagine.
So every Sunday, people knew there wasn't a subject except him who is mighty to save. Now, my feelings on that are different now, but I don't want to get into that. It's not a thing I want to talk about.
So you were dying inside. And while you were out on a break, we were talking about the bind that Mormon bishops are put in. So number one, they're going to have people coming to them. Well, like you said, they're going to see problems of how the sausage gets made. So that could trigger a faith crisis for a Mormon bishop. And then they're going to have people come to them with doubts and questions. That could cause a faith crisis. And then just people are leaving the church in droves these days anyway. So just by being a Mormon, there's a decent chance you're going to have a faith crisis in 2024. But then we juxtapose that with the expectation that a bishop's always going to serve for 5 years, right? So we talked about whether if you ask to be released early, that just sends the whole ward a signal that you either masturbated or committed adultery or something like that. But then it's worse because you also probably don't want to destroy the faith of all the members. And if you ask to step down and it's for faith reasons, then everybody's going to it's potentially going to put them all in a faith crisis spin. And even if you're mad at the church, I'm guessing y'all didn't want to do that to all the ward members, but you're in a catch-22 of you're wanting to die. But if you step down, it's going to cause all these problems for you individually, for your family, and then for the ward. It's really a catch-22 that's horrific.
So there were two things that occurred in the last maybe 6 weeks of my service. One, a young woman came to me to tell me about masturbation. And I stopped her before she even finished. I said, "You don't get to come to me ever again to tell me about any of this. You're perfectly fine. You're trying to figure out who the flip you are. You didn't do anything wrong." And I kept worrying someone else was going to call the executive secretary and set up an appointment to tell me that kind of stuff again. And I couldn't do it again. I couldn't do it. I'm a tough guy, y'all.
Yeah.
But my heart can't take that. Number one. Two, a man came 78 years old and just battled prostate cancer. 30 plus years prior, he had an affair. He had been rebaptized maybe a decade or more ago. But because he wouldn't write a letter to his ex-wife and apologize, they wouldn't restore his blessings. And this man thought he was going to die and not be good enough to make it to the highest degree of the celestial kingdom in Mormonism is heaven. They were holding this over this man's head. And he wept, 78 years old, wept with me the pain that he's been through. Well, I said, well, that's going to end today. I'm calling the stake president, and we are going to have your blessings restored. I don't care about a letter. I don't care what previous people have said. This is happening. Stake president's on board. Here's the problem. There's a paperwork I have to fill out. And in that paperwork, it asks detailed questions of what they did 30 plus years ago.
Wow.
And I called the stake president and said, I refuse. I texted him. I sent a screenshot and I said, I refuse to participate in this. no man should have to rehash those things to somebody who doesn't even know about it. I said, so this is my window out. I told him, I said, this is me stepping down. You call a new bishop. I'm stepping down.
Because he wouldn't back down on that?
He can't. Church won't let that happen. He would too. I believe he would. I believe he doesn't agree with it. He's a moral man. He's a good man.
So did you feel kind of like your back was pushed up against the
Yeah,
wall?
100%.
Your like personal integrity.
I was glad though, because it gave me a way out. Like, ooh, I can use this as my reason to not serve anymore as a bishop. Because I won't rehash that. And it wasn't just him. There was another gentleman also who had a similar situation that was not as long ago who had to do the same thing. And he was going to have to sit down in front of me and hash it all out so he could have his blessings restored so he could go to the temple. And I wasn't going to participate in it.
Yeah.
And I told them no. So call a new bishop. Well, that takes time. And I just didn't have time. I couldn't do it any longer.
And it's fair to say that experience with the sexual predator and Kurt McConkie and finding that he was in your midst and being told to stand down by the church's law firm, wasn't that also part of it?
Absolutely. All of it.
Yeah.
It's
cumulative,
when
right?
people say, what broke your shelf? It can't be one thing. I'm sorry. It's everything. That's why it's a shelf. It holds a lot until it can't hold it any longer.
Yeah.
It's all of that. It's all of that.
Yeah.
It's how they're not being honest. And all you have to do is step outside just for a minute. Adam God theory, wrong. Racism, we were wrong. Polygamy, we were wrong. DNA in the Book of Mormon, we were wrong. Why do we continue to think that we have to be right about everything? We have to want to know the answer more than we want to be right. And in Mormonism, we'd rather be right than know the answer.
Yeah. So it just reached ahead, and then your wife was, Amanda was telling us that you were wanting to just white knuckle it for another 2.5 years.
That was a plan, John.
But then she wasn't loving that idea. So do you guys want to tell us how you together made the decision?
I would come home and cry. See, that's the thing, the members who are judging me now, they don't know.
Yeah.
I'd come home and cry to her, my kids.
Yeah, there's no way. 2.5 more years.
I was miserable, and then I'd take it out on them. And I'm not an abusive, controlling man at all. I would be irritable, and I had to keep it to myself. And I said that in my, as I resigned, I had to keep it a secret. So, yeah, I keep it a secret, and my wife and my kids pay for my secret. And yet the family is all that matters. So when they called the new bishop, what's interesting is they asked me who I thought should be the next bishop, an apostate.
Did your stake president friend try and help you, try and resolve your concerns, try and intervene, try and help you get to a better place? And by the way,
Yes.
I don't want you to violate any confidences.
No, I wouldn't. I would never do
Yeah.
that to him. He's a brother to me. He's been nothing but gracious and kind. And anyone who knows him can vouch for that. He's a good man. And I don't like to use that word because that gets used too loosely in Mormonism. Oh, he's a good man, when they don't even know anything about them. People called me a good man. They don't know anything about me. But I know him. He's about as good as they come. He wants to do good. He tried to help, but I don't think you can help this thing once you get to a certain point. I don't think there's help. You're out. You're done. He knew that I was going to step down. I told him the Monday before. I said, can we hurry up? We need to get a new bishop called. We need to process this quicker because I'm really struggling. I don't know how many more weeks I've got. He's like, I'm on it. He's trying. I said, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to just let the ward members know that I am stepping down in the next few weeks. because I didn't want them to just think that I just gave up on them. I thought in that moment that it was the right thing to do. I had no idea it was going to go viral. I had no idea any of this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Is it also fair you didn't want people to think that you had committed some sin? I mean, is that fair?
Well, I said that in the talk. This isn't because of some sin. And now people, because of what I've said today, they're going to say, oh, yes, it was. Fine. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Those are the ones that want to hide. That's fine. I'm not even going to go there with them. It just was, I felt like I owed it to them. That was simple as that. That's as far as my mind and my thought process went. I did not premeditate sitting down with John and Margie DeLynn on Mormon Stories. Mm-hmm. I've admired you for what you've done. I've hated you as well.
What?
I have, absolutely.
Wait, how dare you?
Yeah. I was like, look at that son of a gun. He's up there ruining people's lives. Mm-hmm. But if I could just maybe talk about John for a minute. He may not want this, but I called John, or John called me. No, you called me. You did reach out to me on Reddit. Said, hey, I'd love to visit with you. And I was in a really bad place. I couldn't even form a full sentence practically with him. And he said, you don't have to do anything. You don't owe me anything. You do what you feel is best for you. He had my best interest and my wife and my family's best interest at heart. He didn't try to put me on the show. No, this was me wanting to do it. And here's why we want to do it. Because of the thousands and thousands of messages I've gotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who say, you're my hero. Me? I didn't do anything. I just did what I knew was right for me and the people that I loved. But it wasn't just, you're my hero. It was, my Sunday school teacher as a child would rape me after church. And then he would give me a priesthood blessing to tell me it would all go away. And then when I confronted the bishop with it, the bishop said, what did you do to cause that man to do that to you? And it's not one or two or three of those stories, John. I'd have to guess it's probably 50 or 60 out of thousands, which isn't a lot in thousands, but every one of them need validation. They need to have a voice, and if I can be that for them, you better believe it. Absolutely. In fact, I thought about on my TikTok, can I talk about this for a second? I'd like for people who have stories like this, you can send them to me, and I'll be your voice. I'd love to form a nonprofit organization to take care of the tens of thousands of boys who are abused by the scouting program in the church. Because we know the church won't fork out a penny. Mm-hmm. And we know the scouting program's filing bankruptcy. I've got a lawsuit with them. I won't ever see a dime. And I don't care about the money. But there are some people who are suffering. Why can't we get someone like Elon Musk or Joe Rogan who have a voice to say, hey, let's do this thing. Let's create an organization to heal the people who've been damaged by the umbrella of protection religion has given them. I don't know enough about that, y'all. I can tell you everything about wood floor, everything you ever want to know, and how to mill it. I know all of that, but I don't know anything else. But if we could do something like that, I feel like I could hang my hat on a life like that to help people, to be their voice.
Can I ask you a question about kind of, and this may be hard to answer, but like, what does it feel like being both of you right now in this moment in time? With kind of like, what are you holding? What does it feel like? So people can kind of connect with you where you are today.
Oh, it's felt like gut-wrenching pain that I've never felt before. I'll go from doing something to just like literally in the fetal position crying on the floor. And my kids come around me trying to, help. My littlest daughter, one time she came and put her hand behind my head and forehead to forehead. And she was like, "It's okay, Mom. I've got you." So it sucks. I feel bad because of the way I looked at people who left before this. Because you don't know this pain until you go through this pain. And, as a member of the church, you brush it off as, oh, they left. Maybe they left. I told Nick this. I had a realization one morning, and I was like, we're all so taught to judge. Like, we say that we don't judge, but we're so taught to judge because of all the things that we're taught to fear. Drinking, tattoos, whatever it may be. Then we go out into the world and we see these people who've left the church that have these things, and we instantly judge them. And it puts fear in our mind, thinking, oh, okay, we'll stay away from that so that we don't leave either. And it's like, wow, I can't believe that I see that now. But it's something that you literally can't understand unless you feel the pain that you're in. Yeah, so it sucks. There's been moments I just have to put my phone away and try to not think about it, do something else, go hang with the kids but
It's so freeing to be where we are.
it's the flip side.
It feels like the walls are completely gone. I'll give you an example. My wife, I want her so bad to come sit on my lap because she always sits on my lap. But the other night, our thing right now is we built a house together, her and I, like from the ground up. I built it with my own two hands. Like our date night was every night at the house till 1 a.m.
It was so fun.
on 30 acres. So we have 30 acres. We go in the backyard, we build a fire, and our kids come out, and we're just present with them now. We sing, we cry. But she sat on my lap, and I put my hand up her back. And it was the first time I'd ever done it and felt her skin.
Best thing ever.
And I was like, oh my gosh, they even took that from me.
It's like they want to take that.
It's like your garments are like, my buddy Jordan, I'm going to give him a shout out. He called them sensory deprivation clothing.
So true.
It's so true. I was like, oh.
I'm like, I've never felt prettier in my life than I do now because I don't have to form my
Yeah.
clothing around
That's
my
right.
garments.
Yeah.
And like, even silly things like going to bed in your garments. I'm like, oh yeah, that's sexy.
That's right. That's
It's
right.
made our relationship way better, just in all aspects. Honesty, all of it.
We're having moments
And
of
this has
healing.
been years really in the coming. It's not like it's
Say that last part again. I didn't hear you.
it's been years in the formation of our relationship being better. But now it's just like it's even 100 times more better than
Yeah.
it was becoming.
I'll give you an example of something in healing that we've had recently. We sat on the front porch with Luke, my oldest, and Charlie, our second. And we were just having this heart to heart. I never had these with my kids until recently. But I told him, Luke, I don't want to tell you what to do, but I don't want you to go on a mission. If I had to choose, I would rather you didn't. And he just started to cry. Like it was like this weight. Like you see it as a bishop when you see people leave feeling like, oh, finally I can get rid of that thing. Like his shoulders just dropped. And he was just like, oh, and he's 5 months away from going.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And he was terrified of it. But he was just going to do it because he knew that's what was going to make mom and dad happy.
He was terrified of having to grow up so fast.
Yeah. I told him he's got as long as
It's
he
like
needs.
we put that in him, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So little by little, we're seeing little things happen that are healing our home,
Yeah.
our kids, ourselves.
Yes.
But I have heard that it's, a year for every decade you're in the church? Deconstruction on average. So I have 4 years. Amanda has 4 years of this. And that's okay. We're up to the task. And partially because we know people who've been at it for 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years.
30.
30 years.
Really quickly, I just want to say we've got 4,000 people in the live stream. Can everybody hit the like button? Not for any selfish reasons, but if everybody were, there are only 1,000 people who hit the like button. If all 4,000 of you right now would hit the like button or after, this will send that into the algorithms and have this interview be promoted. And if it gets blasted through the algorithms, then this interview will get viewed, I don't know, 100,000 times in the next week or two by a lot of people, and it'll help a lot of people. So please subscribe and please like right now, please comment. Even if this is days later, it will really help this interview do well. So, and thank you to everyone who's sent us super chats and everyone who makes this possible. Margie, I was, go ahead.
Were you still going to continue?
Yes.
Okay.
But will you remember what you were going to say? Okay. So, would you spend a little bit of time talking about how the ward has reacted? These are people, you've been in this ward for how long?
20 years. 20 years.
So that's very personal. When you've been in a ward, a congregation for 20 years, you know these people really well. And then when you serve as their bishop for 2.5 years, where you're showing up at midnight or 1 o'clock in your suit, among thousands of
Your
other
phone
things,
is not on
helping
silent
their
mode.
youth, going to bed every night with your phone not on silence. Like, you serve these people in a way that few of our listeners and viewers have ever served anyone. You're serving hundreds of people in the most personal, intimate ways. Without wanting you to, throw shade on anyone, can you talk about how the ward members have treated you and your family since this happened?
Yeah.
Good and bad.
The answer is going to be very short, only because how many people have showed up? 3? 1, 2,
Counting 2.
3, 2. 2 families?
Yeah, I don't know the third one.
Two families
Have what?
have shown up at our house to tell us we love them.
To
Who are
tell
still
you
in.
they love you
Yeah.
and the rest?
Nothing. I got the check. And this is going to hurt people, but this is how I see it. And if I'm wrong in this, I'm perfectly okay with admitting it. But I got a slew across the stake of text messages of, we just want you to know we love you. And to me, in my own mind, that is, okay, I checked the box. I did my ministering with him, and now I don't have to do it again. That's what it feels like to me. Mm-hmm. Now, there have been 2 who have, well, not just 2.
3. Yeah.
There's been phone calls as well.
There's been.
But 2 are home, too.
But they're the ones that we already were very close with as
Yeah.
well,
The current bishop and I talk weekly. I still get tithing envelopes in the mail, and I take them to him. I reported everybody in the ward full tithe payers for the year.
You never got to that.
I didn't tell you that. It was my.
Tell non-Mormons why that's funny.
So you sit down and have tithing declaration at the end of every year, and you have to fill in. There's 447 people in the ward on my ward roster. You have to fill in a bubble as full tithe payer, part tithe payer, or non-tithe payer, and then declared by the individual who paid the tithing, or declared by the bishop if they weren't there to declare it for themselves. But the Brandon ward is the only ward in the entire church that was recorded as full tithe paying, declared by themselves. And I'm going to tell you, the blessings that the ward are going to get are going to be unbelievable.
So you basically declared them all as full tithe payers.
I
to
think
the
that
church.
they are going to probably one day thank me for the temple that'll be built in Mississippi.
And honestly, you did that. Why? Why'd you do that? Somebody's going, oh, that's dishonest. Why did you do that?
Fine, because all of it's dishonest. The fact that a woman comes into my ward every week who doesn't have 2 pennies to rub together, and she pays $8, y'all, in tithing. And here's the problem. She writes 8 on the tithing slip, but there's $11 in the envelope because she can't even count it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not okay to rob these poor people. when you have hundreds of billions of dollars and it only costs $500 million a year to operate the entire church? I've read the Widow's Mite reports. It doesn't cost a fraction of what they gain in interest in a quarter to operate the entire church and to build all the temples that old Rusty wants to build. Sorry if that offends people, but it makes me angry that we are robbing these people and telling them they're going to be blessed. It's not okay. So instead, I would help them. I'd pay their bills. I'd make sure if they paid $8, I made sure they got everything. Gosh, it's so bad. It's so hard for people to see. That's what's, I'm being judged. I know I am. I can feel them. But if they just step outside just for a minute, they'd be shocked at what they saw. And here's the thing, you don't have to stand at a pulpit to step down and make it videoed and put it out there. Just step away. I know you're scared. I am too. But there's beauty in it. I can never go back. I can't ever go back to a church.
And going back to the response of your ward members and the two families that did reach out, how would you, what would you have hoped the response would have been for people you had loved and served for 2 to 20 years?
John, I don't have a hope for them. My hope for them is that they will eventually see that they've been lied to. That's my only hope for them. I'm not asking for anything from anyone because I don't need it.
But you got to feel disappointment. We did. When we were excommunicated.
Yeah, it hurts. I don't want to say disappointed. I'm not disappointed in them. I know they might be disappointed in me. It hurts that our relationship was based on the belief of the church. And it's not deeper than that. But I'll tell you, there are a handful in the ward. It's deeper than that. And those people I love and would do anything for. So that's all I need. I want a small group. In fact, my cousin's husband said when I was in the church, my friendships were 1 inch thick and 1 mile wide. And when I left the church, my relationships were 1 inch wide and 1 mile thick.
Or deep, yeah.
Yeah.
Or deep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can see that.
Yeah.
That's a little shout out for Jeff Pearson. I love you, buddy.
Powerful. Has it been for what are you wanting to say, Amanda, for you or for the kids in terms of how, because it wasn't easy for our kids to face what we faced. And Margie, it wasn't easy for you.
I think it's one thing to, have a major faith or life shift, right? That's one thing. Yeah. I think it's another thing when it becomes public.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's just been a roller coaster. Our kids have their days, and usually you can tell when they're having a rough day, and it's usually a random person, and we'll sit down and kind of talk it through. As far as like friends and stuff, the friend group that they've grown up with since they were babies has been amazing. And they actually went out last Friday night and had a ball, and I was so happy because they were nervous, and it just made my heart happy. And so I hope, that's all I can hope for them, is that their true friends will stay true to them, and I feel like they will. It's just an emotional up and down, nonstop, I feel like,
Yeah.
for all of us. And it's still so fresh. It feels like it's been a year. but it's only been a couple of weeks.
That's
Yeah,
right.
it's been like, is it less than a month?
Yeah.
It is a month. It was December 31st.
Yeah.
Was the day we stepped
Oh
down.
yeah. So right at a month, but it feels like it's been at least a year.
And if we could maybe address that just briefly, because a lot of people are hurt because we never came back. We fully intended to continue to be the bishop and the Jones family in the ward, however long it took for a new bishop to be called. It was when this went viral,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden people like the radio, what were the Mormon, what's the guys that made fun of me for an hour and a half?
Is it Radio Free?
Oh,
Mormons?
Ward Radio.
Ward Radio.
That's
Okay.
Kwaku and Cardin
Yeah,
Ellis.
who's the guy
and-
behind the soundboard?
That's Cardin Ellis.
Cardin Ellis?
Yeah.
I'd like to sit down with him and talk to him. I think he's completely misread me. I don't appreciate what he's done, but I'm not a coward. And I'd stare him in the eyes and I'd talk to him and give
What did
him
he
a
accuse
real
you of?
narrative.
What did he accuse you
I
of?
couldn't only listen to 20 minutes of it.
Yeah. It was
They just
like
mocked
so
my
fresh.
videos.
I told him
Not
turn
my
it off.
videos, but the resignation. They spent an hour and 40 minutes making fun of me, basically. And that's fine. I would never do that to him. I don't know him. And even if I did, I wouldn't do it to him. So it's sad that these people feel the need to do that. Sometimes I wonder if they're employed by the church to just make noise.
Yeah.
But as much as I'd love to put him in a heel hook or a chokehold and teach him how to be a decent person, I don't think you can. Some people just want to talk mess on people, so that's fine. But so the ward members know and the stake members know, we had fully intended on being there until this had just completely fizzled out. But when all of a sudden I was in the public eye and a new bishop was being called that next Sunday,
Yeah.
I felt like I'm going to just take away from all of that.
Yeah. I see that.
And so in my mind, I was trying to do the right thing by not coming because I knew it was going to be extremely hard for everybody if I was there. And if I wasn't there, it was going to be hard. But I think it would have been harder if we would have been there.
Yeah.
So that was our reasoning why we haven't been back.
Yeah. Two hard choices, really.
Yes, you're between a rock and a hard place, and
Yeah.
you're like, what do I do? Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you just get to a point where you realize, like whenever that happened and he stepped down, I was in primary and I was like, this is my last day in primary. And then I was like, no, it's not. I'll be here next week, couple of weeks. It'll be fine. But as I sat there like with the kids and looked out at the primary room and saw like the articles of faith plastered on the wall and the pictures of the first presidency, I was just like, I no longer believe in any of this. I'm standing up here teaching it to these kids. Like, I don't need to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one normal fear, conditioned fear that Mormons have is I can't be a faithful spouse if I'm not active in the church, and I can't be a good mom or dad or good parent,
Right.
and there's no way my kids will be healthy and happy without the church. You're nodding.
Yeah, because you think life's going to come crashing down on you. That's
That's
what we
part of the
both
conditioning,
thought.
yeah.
You feel like your businesses are going to fail because you're not paying tithing, because you're not living the word of wisdom to a T, because you're opening up about things that go on in the temple that you are now recognizing are not what you thought they were. And you fear the wrath of God. Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, you're wading in 3 feet of water. Just stand up.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah. I have a question. I feel like really we've captured you in this pause moment of a storm for you all, which I can only imagine how overwhelming, destabilizing, like all the things. And as you said, freedom, like I think paradox shows up here, opposing things that are true, right?
Yeah.
And authenticity, you're having like very authentic conversations with your children, it feels like, but nonetheless, just so very overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
I would just love to hear some of your hopes if you can speak to them like hopes for the future or, you know?
I actually wrote something about the future recently. I've got some notes here. Can I tell you? Yes, and I'm gonna segue into that. When you step away from thinking you're celestial material and everyone else around you who's not a Mormon is not, you see the beauty in the world. So I can't take pain medicine, so I had to get my medical card to help with this surgery I had. And in this cannabis shop, this girl sitting here, and she's got nose piercings, she's really pale, tattooed. And in the church, I wouldn't have given her a second of my time. She wasn't celestial enough. And in an instant, all of a sudden, she was so important to me. She needed to know that I was interested in who she was and that she was somebody to me. And what was interesting is because I had that paradigm shift, she wasn't giving me the time of day either. But all of a sudden, I asked how she was doing, what she liked, and everything changed. So I've been doing this now with a neighbor, and my neighbor's like 600 yards away, but I called him the other day. I said, man, you've asked me to have a beer with you like 1,000 times, and I just turned you down, and I didn't want anything to do with you because of that. I'd like to sit down and have a beer with you. I want you to know that I've left a religion that was a high-demand religion that didn't allow me to connect with you. I told him this. And I know that sounds really weird and crazy, but I want you to know I'm not a bad guy. I'm a nice guy, and I want to be your friend. I called a man who left the church 12 years ago, who was in our ward. I went to his home time after time trying to convert him back to Mormonism. I talked to him yesterday morning. His name's Dan Sherman. About 7 months ago, I went to his house to try to get him to come back to church. Maybe not 7, maybe a year ago now, because it was before I started Deconstruct, with a good friend in the ward. And we knocked on the door, and I asked if we could come in, and he said, you can't come in, but he can. Because years ago, I was told by a bishop to take him the sacrament on a Sunday after church. And I've force-fed him bread and water in his living room, basically. And it had an effect on them that made them hate me. And I was able to get on the phone with him yesterday and tell him I was sorry. And offer him some kind of, peace treaty.
Yeah, and acknowledging.
Yeah, it's powerful. He wants to sit down and have lunch and hang out and talk. It's beautiful what you can do when you aren't limited to how you can approach somebody and love somebody.
The barriers are kind of gone.
The walls are gone.
Yeah.
The shame, the guilt, gone. I can tell you anything you want to know. It's freeing.
I have a friend that calls it surrendering the one up, right?
Yeah.
Surrendering that you're better than anybody, right? That instead you're just all equals.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me a little bit even of what you described with your children.
Yeah.
That people become real. People become alive,
Yeah.
significant to you.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's just frustrating, and you become angry because you feel robbed a little bit of recognizing the beauty that was always there, but you were refusing to see it because of this thing that you were programmed to think. And some people can do it. Some people can juggle the two, and kudos to them. I can't. I had to be true to that thing.
Yes.
So I couldn't do it while in. And I'm not saying you can't. Maybe you can. And if you can, great. I couldn't.
Yeah.
So give me that grace as much as I give you that grace.
That's right.
I should say us. I'm sorry, honey.
Oh, you're fine.
Give us that grace because she is 100% in this with me.
Yeah.
So we'll have some closing comments, but I'm just going to remind everyone, number one, that it's February 1st. For those of you who are watching or listening live, 7 p.m. at Bewilder Brewing, downtown Salt Lake, 445 South, 400 West. If you want to have a beer with with Bishop Jones. You can have a beer with Bishop Jones tonight. 7 to 9. I'm not sure if I'll be there. Rebecca Biblioteca will be there, and it's your way to meet this guy, get a selfie with him and his wife, Amanda. Tell them that you love them and how much you appreciate them. Also, please, again, hit the like button, subscribe so that we can blast this everywhere. Maybe to close, you wrote a lot of stuff. I want to give either of you any chance to make sure and say any other things. And we can go for another hour. Like, I'm sure you won't. But Bishop, Nick, Amanda, any final words either of you want to share?
Yeah, I'd like to share a few things. Christ means the anointed. It's not the surname of Jesus. In Sanskrit, the meaning of Christ is the man who woke up, who discovered who he really was. I feel like the world is waking up in its own little way. John, you and Margie have done an incredible thing. So I commend you for being pioneers in this thing to help people out of the pain and manipulation that is just perpetuated upon them. I thank you for that. And all of those who stand with you, I admire you, but I don't put you on a pedestal. I refuse to do that. In fact, that's my trigger. If anybody is elevated over another, I'm out. 100%. I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. So I would say step into the unknown. It's a place without walls. And it's terrifying. But it's painfully beautiful. Mm. That's all I really have to say. Thank you. Thank you so much for offering us to come. Mm. We just simply want to help people in our own little small way. And I'll let Amanda say whatever she has to say. She's more important.
No. I guess really just following that up. I hope that through this, I know probably still will cause pain to some, but I hope that they can at least see that we're just trying to spread love. We love you, the friends that we've had for this long. We love the new friends that we're making. And just want it all to come together, mm-hmm. For people to feel peace and happiness. That's where I would say we hope to get, is to a peaceful place. And you had asked about hope. Mm-hmm. But, and the same for y'all just allowing us to be here. I know it's helped me just being here and talking through things. So that's a gift and a blessing. I'm grateful for it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. So for those who can join us tonight, we'll see you there. Tomorrow morning, I believe we're going to have a panel of 4 Mormon bishops, ex-bishops. They're going to talk a little bit more about, being a bishop in the modern age. I think Nick's going to be here with a few other friends. So check back for that. And we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Margie, any final words?
Just a final, all the gratitude to you both. It's one thing, I think, to talk about hard things. It's another thing to really be in a storm and have a lot of things coming down around you. Yeah. And to be as vulnerable and brave and generous as you both have. So really just thank you to you. And we're just wishing you all the good healing love for your futures, and want to hug you both up in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maven's reminding me or asking me to give a shout out to floodlit.org. It's an organization that is sharing, I guess, a registry of sexual predators within the Mormon Church, just so that there can be a way for you to know who's out there and how to protect yourselves, since the church won't do it. So shout out to floodlit.org and the good work they do. Shout out to Ex-Mormon TikTok and the Ex-Mormon subreddit, because those are very important ways our community can communicate and find out about these things. So thanks, Ex-Mormon Reddit. Thanks for Ex-Mormon TikTok. Thanks to Maven and Julia and Brooklyn and Gerardo. That's my core staff here in terms of production. They make all this possible. Margie, I love having you here as my co-host. And our board makes all this possible too. Thanks to all the donors that donate to Mormon Stories and the Open Stories Foundation. We couldn't do it without you. It's the monthly donations that keep us going. So if you value this type of content and you want to see it continue, we lose donors every month. And if we don't replace them, then we have to start cutting back. So if you feel moved to support us or to pay it forward, go to mormonstories.org, become a monthly donor, and we'll appreciate it. We also thank all those who donate through Super Chat or through, Venmo or PayPal or Patreon, however they do it. Anyway, thanks for joining us today. We love the live stream. We have lots of good stuff coming up. I love what I do most of the time. And be good to each other and be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. And Nick and Amanda, your courage as two people who have lived public scrutiny and have felt the pain individually as a couple and for our children for trying to stand for truth. I don't think there are a lot of people who know how hard it is to do what you two have done, how courageous it is, and how meaningful it is. That level of courage is almost unheard of in this community. As brave and as powerful and as beautiful as this community is, few people have the courage to do what you've done. So Margie and I are witnesses to you. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we honor and respect you and your family. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
So much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so
Amanda.
much.
All right. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. We'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.